IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories. more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further. And just together, we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
Here we go, Coach. I can't hear nothing on this. You got it.
Hold on, wait.
Yes, like we always do at this time. IMHO family, none other than Sir Charles, Razor, Miss Max. We are in the boots in the building for yet another Sunday. And that's right, I did say Razor, it's been a minute. My man been like hot this summer. Razor has not been in studio with us in a little while, man. How you feeling today?
Feel good. Max forgot to lock the gate this morning.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's
what happened. You took the car keys and just snuck
bolted.
out.
You seen the dog when they come off the chain, tail dragging across the grass, running in circles.
Give it up for Razor.
Yes, indeed. Glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. Let's give it up for Razor, none other. Man. So I'm just so delighted today. Yet another Sunday. Tell a friend. IMHO talk show. Another great show. We're going to be joined. Get a follow up from the Respect the Neighbors campaign. Okay. They're going to be back here with us. Also, we're going to be joined by the new executive director of the Police Oversight Board, Officer INEZ Gonzalez. But for this first hour of our show, we are joined by none other than AMAKA AGUGUA-HAMILTON, aka Coach Mox. Can I just call you Coach Mox? AMAKA,
can we call you Coach Mox?
Sure, you can.
But did I get the name right though? Did I get the name right? AMAKA AGUGUA-HAMILTON.
You did that time, not the first time.
Oh man. I'm trying. No, but she is none other than the head coach of the UVA women's basketball team. And man, I'm so delighted to have had a privilege of meeting her, Razor, when she first stepped on grounds last year. And just the amazing work that you've done with the team, with the program. Want to applaud you, and leading into this season, wanted to invite you on to talk to you to see how things are going so far, what the new season looks like. But once again, welcome to Charlottesville. Appreciate having you.
Thank you. I guess I'm not really new to Charlottesville anymore.
Right.
Permanent resident at this point, no, but it's been great. Everybody's been welcoming. Year one is over. We're excited about year two.
Yes, indeed. We are as well. So the first question is we got a few for you, and so why UVA? Like I know you may not have been asked that since last year. But what was it about the University of Virginia athletics program that drew you here for this step in your career?
Yeah, I'm a Virginia native. I'm from Northern Virginia, so not right here in Charlottesville, but being from the state, growing up, UVA was, women's basketball was in the forefront of the country. Debbie Ryan had them rolling, Dawn Staley, Wendy Palmer, Tammy Reese, all those great names before that had come through here. So, growing up, all I knew about UVA was the Final Fours, the Elite Eights, the championships, ACC championships, all that stuff. So I kind of grew up in ACC country anyway. So I always had a special affinity to UVA. And then the academic piece, I grew up in a household that valued academics, and, UVA is a great academic school right in our state. So it's always been, a place where I guess it's been kind of near and dear to my heart. But then when this opportunity came about, Carla Williams is just, probably the best athletic director in the country. No shade to any others. She's amazing. And then, just her leadership, her vision for the women's basketball program, for the athletic department, her ethics, morals, all that stuff was really in line with mine. And so to me, it was like, wow, this is, I'm a God-fearing woman, so I pray about everything. And I felt like, God put this in my path for a reason. And then on top of it, just the resources, the facilities, the community support, fan base, all that stuff, Wahoo Nation. To me, it was just a total package.
Nice.
Can I ask a question, Joe?
Oh, you don't have to ask the question.
Yeah, I ain't been here so long. I'm trying to be respectful as long as I can.
I appreciate it.
Coach Ma, I got a question for you. All right. What expectations have you set for yourself? Because I know coming into a new program, there's going to be nervousness regardless. When you tell somebody that you have anything to do with Charlottesville, they immediately try to associate certain atmospheres that have happened here with, your experience. So that being said, coming on year 2, what type of expectations do you have for yourself?
I don't really like to put expectations on the season. I'm very optimistic about this season, just like I was last year. And, we ended up starting out great, 12-0. And then we had some injuries that kind of derailed us a little bit. But I love our group. I love what we're building. I love our foundation of culture and family that has been established here and just continue to grow. So I wouldn't say, we have team goals that I'll keep in-house on what we believe we can be capable of and what we're trying to strive for this year. But for me, it's just to continue to impact young people. I'm competitive. I want to win, and I want to compete at the highest level. So, winning an ACC championship and then going on to win a national championship is always going to be the goal that we are, eventually going to reach here. And, but I know there's a process, and that's why I always say progress is the process. I say that all the time because there's a process to this. You're not going to just, win a national championship overnight. So, we celebrate the small victories. We make small goals along the way, but we understand that progress is the process. So for me, the expectation, the goals is just for us to continue to progress, move forward, just help these young people become, independent, successful people that can strive in society too, outside of basketball. So I guess it's kind of like a holistic approach for me. Honestly, I know I'm a basketball coach and I'm here to win games and things like that, but I also am here to impact lives, and not everybody thinks like that.
Now that's right. I don't think I asked the question correctly. That was a coach's answer, right? I want to know what expectations you got for yourself.
That is, I answered the question. I'm a humble coach.
So you're just 100% coach. Got you.
Yeah, I'm a humble coach. Like what you see is what you get with me, and I lead with my heart, and I serve people. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that there's something that I'm striving for myself. I want to do for others and do for my family, and ultimately do for God.
Cool.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, and as you said, and as most folks know, like you came in hot start, definitely turn things around. And I think people can feel it. Like people can feel the culture. Like, but what's your words, to people, like kind of what you just alluded to, like to your team and just to the program, like when it comes to people really understanding, right, and like believing in the process, right? It's like, because that can be hard sometimes, and like we've even seen that locally, like even with our like high school athletics, where it's like when you go through these phases where whether it's kids aren't interested in a particular sport anymore, you're trying to rebuild a program, and and just like communicating that to the folks to understand that it's
give you time.
Yeah, give it time. It's it's the process. Like how do you as coach communicate that, like not just to your team, but like, but to the fans, right?
Yeah, I mean, every coach is different and what they stress is different. So you have to do what's uniquely right for you. But for me, culture wins. We talk about it all the time. Culture wins. So establishing the culture and having people buy into that and understand what it means and having people defend the culture was pretty much what last year was about. And that's kind of an evolution of a thing. So you're going to continue to evolve each year with that. But our culture is based on love, respect, loyalty, synergy, camaraderie, being a safe place for everybody, no judgment zone, that kind of thing, where kids can really strive in that. So if you're a college student, but if you're a collegiate athlete, there's going to be adversity everywhere. Playing a sport, you're going to have adversity everywhere. So understanding how to persevere through that adversity and still be confident and be empowered and things like that are the things that we talk about. And all of that comes back to what kind of camaraderie does our group have? What kind of culture are we operating in? So if you're in a situation where you genuinely feel like you can look to your left and right and people have your back, and people, from a place of integrity and a genuine heart want you to be the best you can be, then it's going to be easier to get through those adverse times because you can do it with a group rather than by yourself. So for me, we use all the adversity. We had a lot of adversity last year, and we use it all as a teachable moment. Because when they get out into the real world, you guys know, I mean, life is hard. They're in this little bubble where, we kind of are helping them with everything, but we want to use that little adversity as a, microcosm of what's going to happen in the future in their life. So I guess all of that translates into how we operate on the floor, So on the floor, we have each other's back. I mean, you could break it down to an X and O thing where, our defense is predicated on, positioning and not leaving anybody on the island, just like our culture is. So everything kind of correlates. And I think that when you're rebuilding a program, you get people to buy into the togetherness of it, then you can be pretty successful.
Question: do you ever find the community or the fans comparing the men's basketball to the women's basketball program?
I mean, yeah, sometimes people say things like that to me, but I don't know if we have the exact same fan base. But if I'm ever compared to Tony Bennett, then that's an honor to me because I think highly of him, and he's an amazing person outside of being a coach. So if anybody does that, I'll take that.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, we are joined once again by Coach Mox, head coach of the UVA women's basketball team. Now, Coach Mox, so tell us about the recruiting process right now, because like you've made some big splashes, like you and your team, as far as like your staff rather, bringing in, the homegirl like Sam Brunell. This year having two, like All-Americans that's right here in our backyard, because for so long, UVA has been sort of, accused of sort of overlooking local talent. So so I want to hear more about you as more from you about what that process looked like and the importance of recognizing talent that we have right here.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to keep the hometown kids home. I think it's important for many reasons. And Virginia and, Northern Virginia, DMV area, all that stuff is a hotbed for talent. There's so much talent in this state alone. So, for many reasons, one, being a hometown kid, either they grew up knowing about UVA, like Sam Brunell, who was a ball girl during some of the really good years, or their parents grew up knowing about UVA, or, whatever it is, they have a sense of pride when they put that jersey on. It means something to them because this was their hometown school, so that's one. But then also for the fan base, they want to see one of their own thrive and take this program to another level. So I think it attracts more attention from a fan base, and they take a little bit more ownership in some of those kids. So there's so many things that are important about keeping in-state kids home, or even just, right outside of Virginia kids that, have grown up loving UVA. So that's been a focus, and that's always going to be a focus. The top kids in the state, we want to keep them here. But then after that, we want to get talented kids that fit my style of play. Number one, if you bring people in that don't fit your style of play, then, that's when you're going to have unhappy kids and transfers and things like that. So one, they got to fit our style of play. 2, they have to fit our culture. That's really, really important to me. So you can be the number 1 player in the country, but if you don't fit our culture, I'm not going to recruit you. I just can't. You can fit our culture, but you can't. Maybe you don't have enough talent. I can't recruit you. We got to find the ones that have the best of both worlds, and there's a lot of them out there that also value academics as well.
Do you ever find people looking at you as an African American coach as opposed to just a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been the case. I think there's a lot that look at me as just, you know, a coach, a great mother, a great wife, mentor. But I don't want to be looked at as an African American coach. I want to, you know, obviously represent my community. That's always going to be, you know, something that's in the forefront of my mind, and also open doors for others and help provide opportunities for others, people of color. But I want to get to the point where all of us women of color that are coaching, or even black males that are coaching, are looked at as equals, looked at as great coaches, and just people that mastered our craft. So hopefully we'll get to that day at some point soon. But I'm also more than just a coach, so I hope people can see that too.
Yeah. And in that vein, if you know, like, you were the first head coach of color at Missouri State for any of their programs, right? And you know, like, so I'm glad to hear you mention that, because, like, you know, right now, especially with last year's tournament, you know, like, women's basketball, you know, is definitely, like, skyrocketed into the forefront because of just the amazing talent, you know, and the game seems to be getting better and better. And so, you know, your fan base here is so glad to see that, you know, like, that our women's team as well seems to be right in that same vein, you know, along with, you know, with this wave of new talent and the new attention that the women's game is getting. And, you know, like, that culture, I'm curious about, you know, that culture sort of like nationwide, because it seems to be like a pretty good, like, network and consensus of support, you know, like, whether you're talking about Coach Staley, you know, former player here, and things of that sort. So it's like, what's your feelings about, you know, like, the women's game right now, and, you know, and sort of like where it's headed, particularly, you know, with the attention, you know, for better, for worse, good or bad, that happened, you know, last year in the, you know, women's Final Four, but like how you feeling about the women's game sort of in general, you know, as far as, like, just as a basketball enthusiast?
Yeah, I mean, I love where we're headed. It's about time.
Yeah.
I think women's basketball is just such an exciting sport, and the more visibility we get, the more people are seeing that. It helps that, you know, the NBA and other male sports are promoting women's basketball, whether it be WNBA or, you know, they're promoting stuff in the Final Four from last year, or just collegiate teams that they like to follow. That helps, you know, because they already got that attention. We're just continuing trying to garner that attention on our side. But I mean, when you watch the game, it's exciting, you know, it's exciting. And I think before, you know, we started to be on this uprise, there wasn't a lot of visibility. So you would see, you know, some Final Four games and things like that, but there wasn't as many games televised. Fan bases weren't exactly how they are now. You see a lot of full arenas now when you watch women's basketball. So it's just growing in all areas of the game. And I think that you're starting to see more women getting sponsorships and, you know, more media traction. And even just in the year or the age of NIL, you're seeing women's basketball players leading the charge in that. So, I mean, I just think that it's going to continue to grow, and it should. I mean, obviously, it's a little bit of a different game than the guys where, you know, you see some dunking and things like that, but there's a lot of excitement in our game, and there's a lot of talent. So hopefully that continues to grow into the professional realms where they get compensated more and get the same notoriety.
Coach, let me kind of shift gears, but not really.
So before you switch,
I got a good one too.
All right, but before you switch gears though, like the dunking though, I mean, like, that's all part of the game though. Like, it's, you know, like, I feel like that the game overall, you know, like, has just evolved, you know, to where it's sort of unapologetic, you know, if I may say that. Whereas, you know, it's like because for so long, you know, as we mentioned, like, men and women's sports like tend to get like categorized. It was almost like, all right, well, women's basketball sort of played this way.
Fundamentals.
Yeah. Like it's fun. It's always been strong on fundamentals. But but it seems like here recently it's like the women are coming out like we ball. Like we have individuality. You know what I mean? So I think that's great for the game. And you got like with the women, like to your point, the women dunking, all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like so it's all the whole evolution is good for the game.
It is, and you're gonna see more and more women dunking in games. There's a lot of women that can dunk. It's harder to do it in the flow of a game, and you want to make sure you get that 2 points and not get subbed out. But you're gonna see more and more of that.
That was a warning to all her players right there.
But back in the day, like it was Lisa Leslie, Michelle Snow, Charlotte Smith, those notable people that could dunk, and then it just started to progress. Obviously you had the Brittany Griners and there was all these other people, but you're going to see more and more of it, which makes it exciting. But there's so many other things that are exciting about the game. So I just love the fact that people are paying more attention.
Yeah. Now, Razor, before Razor goes too, because this may feed in, because knowing your business mind, you may be going here. But you mentioned the NIL, like so we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that, because part of the individuality like that has grown in the game as well. We now also have to where players can sort of make careers out of college now. Like so is that affecting your vision or your style at all?
Yeah, I mean, NIL is what it's meant for is good. There's people that, operate in the gray, toe the line, and also cross the line when it comes to that. But we're always going to operate with high integrity, and we're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So you're never going to see us doing anything illegal or trying to, break rules with that. But we do want to make sure our players have an opportunity to set themselves up for the future. So we, our collective that we work with, kind of third party that we work with is Cavs Futures, and they do a great job of providing opportunities for our kids, our student athletes here at UVA. So a lot of our players have, some of their own management companies that they work with too, just because they have that name behind them already. But everyone on our team has opportunities, and it's because we're in a community that really, really loves women's basketball and supports women's basketball. So, there's definitely, I guess, outlets and different areas where they can go to, utilize NIL, their name, image, and likeness. But not everybody does it the right way. I will say
absolutely.
There is implication and impacts with recruiting with that too. Some recruits are only looking for that, and they don't care about the other stuff that we can do to help them grow and win championships and things like that. So it just depends. It depends on the kid. Some kid is just like, how much you going to pay me? And other kids want to know what we're about.
Right. Well, that should be an advantage for UVA. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there for you, Coach Mox, because you are a distinguished lady and you will not say this yourself. UVA has plenty of money, so that should never stop a recruit. I'm going to put UVA on the spot on that one. What you got, Razor?
And everything that she said actually ties into my next question is, when you said that earlier that your thing is to help cultivate the kids and grow and help them build and become, successful, that references over to you as a coach as well. What's your feelings on when African-American coaches like Coach Sanders goes from a predominantly Black program to another program because of his success? Do you think it's fair that we judge our African-American coaches to say, okay, if you're successful, you need to stay around our kids and our people. Don't go to other institutions to grow. I personally don't believe it's fair to put that box on a person, but I'm also not a coach, and I'm not, in the rooms and know how people think and how hard it is to give people opportunities. What's your take on that when a coach has success and other people want them to come to different organizations that have more money, that have more power, notoriety? What's your take on that?
I mean, I think one, you got to do what's best for you and your family and your career. Maybe him going there, obviously he's different because he's a celebrity and all that stuff, but maybe that can enhance his platform to help more people. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, and how many people they can reach and what their ultimate goal and vision is if they're trying to impact, this next generation. But for me, I think, because I did the same thing. I came from Missouri State. I had a great situation there. I was not, just going to leave there for anywhere. and there was a lot of opportunities that came around. I was definitely blessed to have that. Don't take that for granted, but I was looking for something special. And for me, it's just about where's God leading me, you know, and that drives my life. That's a driving force in my life. So I prayed about everything, and this is where he was leading me. And this is a bigger platform than I was at, where I can affect change, one, you know, and two, also impact more people and more young people and give back at a higher rate. So there's just so many things. And, you know, you also position yourself now. I am a basketball coach and I want to win a national championship one day, and I want to continue to be competitive, and I'm putting myself in a better program, you know, has more resources and things to help me get to that ultimate goal as well. So I think that everybody has to kind of value where they're at and weigh, you know, can I do what I want to do here from a basketball standpoint, from philanthropy or whatever, you know, whatever standpoint you're looking at, can I do it here? And if you can, yeah, you stay. If you can't, you jump. It's not always about money. I mean, I turned down lots of money because it wasn't the right situation. So for me, that's not a driving force. For others, maybe it is. But I think everybody's situation is very unique and individualized. So it's hard for me to say, should somebody do this? Should somebody do that? I don't know what the situation was for him at his other school. You know, I don't know. I don't know that. But I know what mine was, and I know it was great. And it would have taken a lot to get me out of there, which is what it did. So I just think that, you know, I don't know, everybody has opinions on things. I just look at it as, you know, people are doing what's best for them and what can help them get to the next step and whatever their goals and dreams are.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know, right?
Awesome.
Great answer.
Great answer. Great answer. You know, so before we let you go as well, Coach Marks, you know, I got to ask, and this is not to slight any other players, but it's just because we're in Charleston, we're in Central Virginia. Like, sort of, you know, tell us, like, what is it about, you know, Mo and Olivia and Sam, like that, you know, for you to want them to stay home and be a part of this program?
Yeah, I mean, well, Sam, obviously, I had the job for what, like two weeks when Sam got here. So, you know, she was my first recruit here. You always remember your first one to believe in the vision, all of that. Sam is just amazing. She's like an ambassador for our sport, honestly.
Yes, she is.
She's just very mature, understands, you know, the process, bought into the culture, bought into my vision from day one. And we were able to use her in recruiting. You know, she comes from like a crazy background. Everybody knows, you know, USA basketball, this, her rankings, all that. So it was great for recruits to see that somebody like that caliber, you know, really believed in the vision. So we were able to use her in recruiting. And then Mo and O, they actually looked up to her when they were younger, you know, because she was the one in this area that was garnering all that attention. So that helped too. But getting them was tremendous as well. I mean, Mo is right here. Like, she's from Charlottesville, a couple miles from campus or from grounds. And I'm still getting that together. But you know, and Mo's talent is like, those are like generational kids. I mean, they come around once in a blue, and she is just a phenomenal young point guard that it has a bright future ahead of her. Like, her ceiling is so high, and I think people know that, but once they see her compete, they're going to be really impressed. But what's even better than her talent is her as a person, her character. She's just so selfless, so giving, you know, just humble. You know, that kind of thing, just a worker. She's a worker. Like, we have to run a sprint, she wants to come in first. Like, she's just always, she has that mentality. So getting her also really helped with the culture, but also just future recruits. Same thing with Olivia. She's a different kind of talent too. 6'3" guard. You don't see that very often. And she's another one, just a high character kid. You know, these kids are just very, very selfless. And I think that fits into our culture big time. And it doesn't matter all the accolades they have. Olivia's been, you know, she's been ranked, she's been all kinds of things around the country, and went down to IMG to finish her high school, which is a very well-known program. And they still are very humble, and they still want to give, you know, just give back and give to this program, give to the community that they grew up in. So bringing those three just helps. You know, all the hometown talent that's young sees that and knows them, and it's really been helping us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great ambassadors for the game and for the university. Definitely. So, Coach Mox, thank you for joining us for sure, and definitely looking forward to having you back. And we will, we'll definitely be checking in, with the team and they're supporting and rooting you on. But before we let you go, though, what's your word to the fans? We kind of give you closing words to just let the fans know how important their, support is, what to look forward to this season, how to get them tickets.
I'm excited about this fan base. Wahoo Nation's been great since day one, since the day that I was hired. There was so much love and support, and then just to see the numbers of people, fans, butts in those seats, like I say, grow every single game, all the way to the last home game of the season. We had almost 7,000-8,000 people in there. So I want to see us get to 10,000 and above, be consistent, because we're excited to watch, and I think our talent is just going to continue to grow. It's grown this year, but it's just going to get better and better. So their support means a lot. It was hard for people to come in here and compete because of our fan base and how loud they were, and they really had our back through all the adversity. So I appreciate them. I appreciate them so much. I say as much as I can. I try and write as much notes as I can, send thank yous out, things like that. But we need you guys, and get your season tickets. They're on sale now. It'll be an exciting season. We got some big games at home. So please help us get over the hump.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Been joined by none other than UVA women's basketball head coach, Coach AMAKA AGUGUA-HAMILTON. And like I said, continued success. Always a pleasure speaking with you. Until next time, go Wahoos.
Go Hoos. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. And yes, indeed, family, Sir Charles Razor.
Who's up next?
In the building. I mean, we got a little bit left in this hour. Maybe we'll come back and do a little dialogue or something.
Okay.
Who knows? So maybe we may let the music ride out. But they definitely want to stay tuned for the rest of the show. Though the second hour, we are going to be joined by the new executive director for the Charlottesville Police Oversight Board.
I'd like to ask you a question before the next break. With the first week of football, you match up teams that might not necessarily be matched talent-wise, and some scores get run up sometimes, right? What's your take on that? I know it was different when we came along as kids, but now that we a little seasoned and we look at sports differently, and you get a chance to have kids and see how it affects them and what people say and grown-ups. What's your take on when you have essentially a blowout of sorts?
Yeah. Well, that's what we call a teaser, because I'm going to take it to the break and I'll be back. And y'all stay tuned if you want to hear my answer.
Yeah. Get boycotted.
Tell a friend. I am HO Talk Show.
Only choice for R&B, hip-hop, and your favorite.
I heard everybody going off about this show.
101.3 Jams.
HO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Hold on, wait.
You're listening to
Yes. In My Humble Opinion Talk Show. And the booth in the building. Come on, man. Where my hype man?
Yeah, get your time. Look, you doing so much moving over.
I mean, how you supposed to have my back over there, right?
I had your back.
You're supposed to fill in the gaps like you.
Yeah, but your front was the problem. That's what's up. Now get to the teaser, because that was
first of all,
a hot topic come Saturday morning.
Absolutely, glad you led into that, man. But I gotta say though, because in the vein of my answer, first, congrats to the students for making it to that's in another school year.
Yes.
Shouts out to all the faculty and staff keeping our babies safe, teaching our babies what they can. But remember, you know how I do, Razor.
Yeah.
We gotta teach our own too.
Yep.
Can't forget
put
that
it all
part.
in the school system.
There's gaps that as parents and families and communities that we have to fill in.
100%.
Props to the public school system, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I love the fact that they lock the phones up and don't let the kids get to them. I think that is an excellent thing that shows that they care about the students' education first and not about making them happy.
But that's a give and take, though, Ray. That's a give and take. In theory, yes, I agree with you. But then you also, but we've seen where phones have actually come in handy, like when there's been disruptions at schools, and only way the parents knew was that they were able to get text from the child.
But I mean, what happened when we was kids? Like there was disruptions in schools too. So like you said, it's give and take. Give me a phone number, take it.
Yeah. Razor. All right, but yeah, so they back. And man, there's other topics that we can talk about today too. There's a lot of talk about how the history books are constantly getting rewritten, but in some places you see how it's only the Black history part, like that's being objected to, because some folks see that as like anti-American somehow. Like Black people don't play a strong role. But that's my whole point of we got to teach our own as well.
Yeah. But I mean, think about it. It makes perfect sense though, because if your history is my footstool to bring it from underneath my feet, means that I no longer have anything to stand on.
That's right.
So, I mean, it makes sense. We might not like it, but it makes sense.
That's right. System is designed to do what it's doing.
Yeah.
Can't forget that. But to raise this point, question without further ado, and if Miss Max was here, this is actually going to be an Ask Max. Maybe that's why you brought it up, since you didn't want to desecrate the Ask Max today.
Nah, they told us alive that one time. You rename Ask Max, they went crazy.
But we got plenty of questions from the listeners. Thank y'all. Like we said, tell a friend. Because Razor, go ahead and pose that question again for those who may just join us after the break.
Okay, let me reformulate it, because I could feel the offense when I said it. But
through the airwaves?
I felt it through the airwaves. No. I want to see how you polish it up. You do a good job of putting a suit on a pig sometimes. But I know how to pull out the slop and still make them eat. Did that show you I'm a country boy? Yeah. When it comes to like sports, especially the first season, whether it's collegiate, whether it's high school, a lot of the first games aren't matched up evenly when it comes to talent. And for some people, these are tune-up games. So the scores can get crazy. And you can have what's known as blowouts, you know? Now, you have some coaches that once they see that the other team is unevenly matched, they pull the reins back. And others keep the gas pedal, you know, all gas, no brakes.
Yeah. Then do you see that as respectable, or do you see it as we all like when we on this field, we warriors? We take no prisoners. Or do you feel like that's respectable?
I did until I became a coach. You know what I'm saying? Like I was, you know, keep me in the game, coach. Let me keep blitzing. You know, I was that person. Once I became a coach and I got a chance to see what it was doing to the children that were on the losing end of it, then I learned to, you know, hey, let's try to be as respectful as we can. Now, sometimes you putting in your sub still runs the score up.
Yeah, that's
because you trained them differently. You have a different program.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of tune-up games, you know, matching up with teams that aren't evenly matched. I believe in, you know, if you want to know how good you are, match up. The best of the best as much as you possibly can. You know, if you want to tune up in scrimmages and things like that, you know, or your inner squad scrimmages, you know, things like that. But at the end of the day, when you go out there, people have to understand that not everybody trains the same. Not everybody is equal. And if your team isn't practicing the way that they should be, they're not doing two-a-days, they don't have a good program, they don't have the support of the community, they don't have the funding, it's going to come out.
All those are big points, and they all hold their own space.
And the thing about it is parents on the losing side sometimes don't like for adults to say anything about the game, because then they go to, okay, these are kids. You talking about kids, right? And I look at them all as athletes, right? And when you get out there, like, it's just sometimes it's gonna be what it is.
Okay, right.
Yeah, more often than not, it's women that
have been sharpening.
Right. Y'all had me on sideline for too long. So I just want to know how somebody else looks at it that loves sports, that, you know, has a child that plays sports, you know, who loves the community.
Yeah.
You know, you're always mindful when it comes to that type thing. And so what's your take on it?
Yeah, man. My take is, we're talking about competitive athletics, right? Competitive sports, however you want to say it. So in that regard, you know, that's the same thought process of not everybody gets to play. You know what I mean? Because this is competitive sports. This is not recreational. This is not, like it's not developmental. You know, sort of not developmental, sort of at the point. But everybody knows every stage you go to, you're learning something. Right. Like even if you at a D1 college, you're still learning the game. You know what I mean? So not developmental in the sense of it being, you know, like a rec youth league where when you sign up, everybody gets to play kind of thing. So it is competitive to that point. So if you get your butt handed to you, you get your butt handed to you, right from that perspective. Now, I will say though, there is a line, because you do handle, just like coaches got to handle teams differently, even within a team, a coach handles players differently based on the personality. Like coaches are supposed to know their teams and their players, because you know the way you talk to one kid won't motivate him like you know, well, I won't say just kid, but another player, you know, to player. So in that regard, Razor, that's where I draw the line on the other side of this equation. Because yes, it's competitive. There's more or less, the most successful people say you learn more in losses than you do in wins.
That's true.
Because it builds, you know, right? You learn more in a loss than you do in a win. So, but when we're talking about how we got to discern who we're speaking to, that also means who we're speaking about. Because I do take issue with when you have grown folks, and sometimes it's people who are living vicariously because they didn't achieve their sports goals. Now they overly judgmental. You know what I mean? About our kids. And so I do think we got to be careful with that and remember that we're not talking about professional athletes that's getting paid and that it's their job to be on point and like not take a game off. You know what I mean? Like you can criticize that, but how?
I never understood that.
Yeah. So my perspective is just like I got a job. It's just like if I'm in here right now, we doing this radio show.
Yeah.
But if I ain't bringing my computer, I ain't bringing my camera, I ain't pushing the right buttons.
Yeah.
Like you're not doing a good job, and we got to sit you down because there's an expectation. People are expecting me to even play their spots. We got underwriters.
Yeah.
If I don't play their spots, dude, that's your job. You got to do that, right?
So, but you're telling me that the position and the title that God allowed you to have means that you have the right to be disrespected because you're getting paid for it.
I'm not saying disrespected, but I'm saying it comes with the territory for a professional to be called out or pulled to the side. Like that's and sort of like that's sort of a celebrity thing as well. It's like everybody knows that comes with the territory. It's like you are a victim of public opinion when you get in that realm. But the difference to me though is that when we're talking about kids, you got to remember a grown man shouldn't be addressing a child like you address another adult.
Absolutely,
and
I'm with you.
So that's kind of where I draw the line because you also got to deal with the simple fact of again, majority of the players aren't playing and won't go to college to play.
Yeah.
So we're not, you know what I mean? So you got some that's out there because they're like, we want to have a football team. I'm gonna go out and play, or like whatever the team is.
Mm-hmm.
Or some you got a lot of freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their first year playing at this varsity level is new. It's learning curve. Like so, I just think it's about grace, man.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like even professionals need grace.
Yeah.
But I feel like adults, especially when we're supposed to be encouraging children.
Yeah.
Like to me, like that looks terrible. Like that's just ugly for us to be tearing kids down.
Does the encouragement have to come from the
opposition?
opposition?
Does encouragement? What do you mean?
Does encouragement have to come from the opposition? If I'm on the other side of you, do I have to encourage you because you're a child?
From the other side, I'm still not sure I'm following you.
If you're from Madison, I'm from Orange. Am I
Uh-huh.
supposed to cheer for you?
Oh no! Like that's
so. Where is encouragement? What do you call encouragement?
Yeah, that's totally different because if like really you kind of just stay out of it at that point. I mean, because in sports you're gonna get booed. You know what I mean? Like the who I'm there for, I'm gonna cheer for. Who I'm not there for, they may get booed. Now I know VHSL rules say you're not supposed to boo and all that stuff, but people do it, right? Like, but again, that's stuff that comes with territory. It comes with the game. But I don't think that we should be telling our student athletes that now what also comes with the territory are the same people who were saying, man, like y'all need to get out the house, like y'all need to go do things productive.
Yeah.
We can't say the new standard is those same people now gonna be like criticizing you openly in public instead of doing things to help support you and being patient with you.
Gotcha.
You follow what I'm saying? Like
I do. I also understand that, okay, when it comes to sports, we have a catch-22. If it's not an adult talking crazy to the kid and another kid talking to another kid, then it's bullying, right? If it's a professional and a fan talking to them, then they're, heckling. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, honestly, I know people won't like this answer, but it, like you said, it comes with the territory. When you decide to put that uniform on of any form of fashion, football is a violent sport. So you got somebody trying to bust you in the mouth, but we talking about love. Like they kind of don't go together. You know, like, I mean, and if I'm cheering as loud as I can for my team, how does that not affect the other team? We wouldn't do it if it didn't. We wouldn't, when people go to the foul line, we wouldn't be sitting there screaming and hollering trying to make a miss. Like, we're not thinking about their mental capacity. So I think
I got you.
I understand the grace aspect, but it's also something that does not exactly go in the jungle.
Yeah, but that's discernment though. That's discernment because,
and that's a problem.
Because the adults, and again, the students, the kids are looking at us for the guidance, looking at us to be at a maturity level to understand, like to separate, you know what I mean? Like to separate the wheat from the weeds. Yeah. You know, because again.
And what does it say? Let them grow together.
Let them grow together. But them growing together though also is that you understand that part of the game is when I go to an away field, it's going to be a hostile environment. That's part of the game. All I'm saying is what shouldn't be part of the game is when we go back home, we getting beat on again.
Yeah.
Let me get beat up on the field, but then you should be able to come back home like to some encouragement to being like, all right,
You should.
like I understand,
I'm
you got a lot of young players, got a lot of first year players.
Yeah.
You know, you got this, that. Even if you got a top team, right? If the effort is there, like there's still a level of discernment to where, again, we talking about students, we talking about teenagers.
Yeah.
And so all those elements.
But they're not there
all those
cheering
elements
for the
think about-
kids. They cheering for the school.
I got you.
And if people went to school there, they have a certain attachment, a certain love for it. And their passion comes out. Now, I'm not saying like if it's my kid and they booing Dax and Dax crying and that, you know what I'm saying, that I'm not gonna have some type of problem. And Lord knows Miss Max is, you know what I'm saying? But I do understand that, you know, that training before they get in that environment, you know, you have to prepare them for that. Sports is competitive. Somebody's gonna win, somebody's gonna lose. You know, ties ain't really a part of the game.
Yeah. Again, totally agree with that. So to me, we're talking about being on the court or on the field with that environment is versus being at home. And when I say home, I'm using that term very loosely. I'm saying being in our community, like our environment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to be able to like to understand that this is where I'm supposed to be getting nurtured.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Now, what if you ain't doing what you're supposed to? You up late at night, you ain't getting sleep.
I get it.
You eating bad. Like you want me to encourage that?
But here's the other thing though, like that's where we go back to the discernment though, because it's different when you're talking about, let's say that there's first year coach, first year players, all this. Like adults should be able to know, wow, like I probably shouldn't just mouth off because I got to consider these elements that's contributing to this. Like I need to get out my feelings. You know what I mean?
Will we be having this conversation 20 years ago?
But that's what I'm saying. It's different if you got a program that's already built, put together, and they still lackluster. That's a little different. But even in the difference of the criticism, even with that, like there's still a line you can't cross when you talk about adult talking about a child. There's still a line. You know what I mean? And
I got you.
I know exactly what you're saying, but it is different. 20, 30 years ago, it was different. It was totally different. And I know exactly what you're saying, but we built different now too.
No, they built different. You know what I'm saying?
True. That's true. But we also dealing with
asking to accept it. Like, is a lot of people. I'm one of them. I don't watch sports. I don't watch football as much as I used to because the passion isn't there. Because there is no bull in the ring. Because there is no. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I feel you.
In order to go to war, you have to train for it. You know, or it's going to. You know, what's not in you is not going to come out you just because the Friday night lights start shining.
Right.
So then because you didn't give the effort you were supposed to, and they may have, I don't really see it in the kids nowadays, but I just wanted to know how you thought about it, man. That's, you know, that's all.
Yep.
Y'all don't be mad at me. I just got quiet.
No, I appreciate it. I got our guests, got our girl to bring in here. So but no, that's just it, man. Like there's so many elements people got to consider, and I think kids should be able to rely on adults to be understanding when it comes to us addressing them. Because again, we're not talking to professionals, we're not talking to adults, and we're not talking about professionals. So there's so many, and the other element of just our atmosphere here, right? It's like we know a lot of things that that different communities go through. So like all those kind of elements you got to put in. It's like
that ain't got nothing to do with sports, Sir Charles.
No, yes, it does.
Ain't got nothing to do with sports.
Yes, it does, Razor, because you be one of the ones like that also be saying, man, like the kids don't be outside no more. You know all that stuff. Like, but when they're doing things constructive, wouldn't you agree? We should support them doing things constructive and not deter them from doing constructive things because they're not the best at it.
I'm one of the ones.
I
know. I'm just saying. I'm just one of the ones that I can't sit in the stands and you getting beat.
I respect that.
Like, and I know, and you chewing on the mouthpieces and y'all throwing water on each other. And not saying any program around here is doing that. I have seen it. I can't support that. Like, I love football too much for me to sit there and say that I accept this, regardless if the player got my blood in them or not. Like, if you're not dedicated to it, don't ask me to be too, so
I can appreciate
that's just me.
I can appreciate that. But we do got to go to bed. We are over time.
We didn't went way over time. Lord Jesus.
Look, that's why you got to be like, Razor coming up in here tearing everything up. Look, we got to.
Hey, look, I ain't got comfortable yet.
Back in there.
We got to pull off my shoes and put them on your couch.
I made you a much more show. We got more guests coming in, more topics, more discussion. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. IMHO Talk Show.
Somebody out there. Yeah, out there.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Doesn't matter which side is which.
I always keep this closest to that one.
You're listening to In My Humble
Opinion. Good.
Only on
Yep. IMHO Talk Show, Sir Charles Razor, back like we never left, Razor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. Tell a friend as well. IMHO Talk Show online, as well as WVAI on in your streaming apps. But you can see our beautiful faces right now, too, if you want to tune in our YouTube, our Facebook. You know how to find us. But thank you, family. And as we always do, Razor, we keep celebrating our folks, our community.
Mm-hmm.
And, we try to do our job, calling things out need to be called out. And we have another new member to our community. Not so new anymore, but pretty relatively new.
Nah, she knew. She ain't been on here.
Yeah, that's right. You right. Like,
I forgot to tell you, I cut up. I wasn't going to tell you that before I got you on air. I got you now.
Like she is here for her christening. You are now christened to Charlottesville, Virginia, because you are here at In My Humble Opinion Talk Show. None other than INEZ Gonzalez. She is the new executive director for the Police Civilian Oversight Board for this city of Charlottesville.
Give the acronym. They don't know all them words you be talking about.
PCOB.
Thank you.
PCOB. Police Civilian Oversight Board. Yes, indeed. So should we call you Inez, Officer Gonzalez?
Inez.
Inez is fine. All right, thank you. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. So, for those that don't know, let's first preface this conversation by talking about what exactly the Police Civilian Oversight Board is and does.
Well, apparently the 2017 incident that occurred in Charlottesville brought about the need for a little bit more police accountability. And so it's my understanding that a group of residents from the city of Charlottesville made a proposal to the city council to create an oversight body that would actually oversee investigations of the Charlottesville Police Department.
Right. Gotcha. And now, is that clear for you, Razor?
No, yeah, trust me. I know all about what the police do.
All right. No. So in saying that, give us a little more of your background and sort of, what started you in this work that led up to you choosing to come to Charlottesville.
That's a very, very long story. Y'all gonna have time for that?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's as far as relatable to, to being, a officer or like related, to the law, because I read your story and I think it's a great story. I think people need to know exactly where you come from, the experience you bring.
So born and raised in the city of Newark, New Jersey, and ultimately becoming a police officer in 1989. That's how far back I go. And did 26 and a half years with the Newark Police Department. I achieved the rank of captain. I was the first Hispanic female at every rank in the city's history. And ultimately, I was assigned to both the Operations Bureau for half of my career and Detective Bureau, but ultimately towards the latter part of my career after I made captain, I spent close to about 10 years actually from sergeant to captain on and off in internal affairs.
Okay.
And at first I was actually recruited to internal affairs. I was asked, I said no. And ultimately I wound up getting transferred there anyway. But I got to see things from a different perspective and where I thought that, because internal affairs was always viewed as a rat squad, right?
Right.
Cops ratting on other cops.
Yeah.
But then I realized that you can actually do a lot of good where if you do have bad police officers and you conduct a good investigation, you can, have that officer removed and with no chance of coming back, right? Because if you do a bad investigation, through the union process and appeals process and things like that, they can always get their jobs back. So you can do that, but you can also take a police officer who's a good cop that didn't do anything wrong and go as far out of your way to prove, to exonerate that officer rather, as you would to find him guilty. So you can do good either ways. Because it actually has a tendency to kill a police officer's spirit who's a good cop doing right to actually be reprimanded for something that he really shouldn't be reprimanded for just for, let's say, the sake of politics or optics, which is what sometimes happens.
But now Newark to Charlottesville, that had to be a culture shock for you. Why Charlottesville?
Well, because of the 2017 incident, I had been following, I thought that for me, that police oversight was the logical progression in terms of my next career, because I knew that I loved policing and I wanted to make policing better. And I got to see all of the unfortunate high-profile incidents that you saw on television involving very bad police work. And I thought that it would be a natural progression for me to try to get involved in police oversight and to go to an agency that was actually willing and a community that actually wanted that type of police oversight and wanted to make that kind of change in terms of police reform. And so I had been following Charlottesville since the 2017 incident, and I thought, that's a logical place to go. So when I saw the advertisement for the job, I seized the opportunity.
Yeah, had you heard of Charlottesville before 2017? Because a lot of people had.
I had, yeah.
Okay. Because unfortunately, that was definitely sort of a stain on history. There's been many stains on Charlottesville history, but particularly that, where after 2017, you would Google Charlottesville, Virginia, and that's all that came up, right?
Right.
What do you have to be made of to be a woman of color to come to a place that is in pretty much turmoil at a time, seeing what they did to another female police chief, seeing what they do to city managers of color, and still want to step into that? As Black people, we got some other Black people, right? You ain't got a lot of Puerto Ricans around here. So,
True. Well, I've always been a pioneer in that regard. So again, the first at every rank, and then
that's right. Set them straight on this.
No, I'm just wondering, to take and to be a woman and to be internal affairs and to be every time people always giving you a side eye.
Well, and that was the case for me from the very beginning. I was the only female in a recruit class of 64 of the worst individuals that God ever put on the planet. They gave me a really hard time when I was in the academy, but I wound up with a leadership award by the time that I graduated the academy. So, being the first, being a pioneer in terms of women in policing and that kind of thing, that's always been my thing. And I've never been known to be a slouch. I'm somebody who is known to be quite vocal.
Do you think that helped you, that people being tough on you like that?
I think it made me, I guess, a lot more resilient than maybe I would have been if I had not been challenged as much. But I'm actually grateful that I had a mom, God rest her soul, that was always very supportive of me and never told me what it is I could not do. Back in high school, I was always being told what it is I couldn't achieve. And even certain members of my family, because I was raised poor, raised in the projects, public assistance, single parent home. Everybody always told me I would never amount to anything.
Because Charles don't like us to be hard on the football player.
But tell the truth though, Charlottesville probably looks like Disneyland to you. Come from Newark, New Jersey?
New Jersey draft, come on now. Come on now, Davis.
Listen. Well, let's say things that you have in common. Great restaurants, right? You're not lacking in restaurants. So the food is good. A lot of culture here. Is it less activity than I'm accustomed to? But that's not necessarily a bad thing,
right? Because
where I came from. So crime is a thing there. It used to be that we were for example, the stolen car capital of the country.
Absolutely. Made a movie about it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Our shootings and crime and things like that. So yeah, it was a challenging environment, but I think it made me the person that I am now.
What about racism?
Oh wow, that was a constant. A lot of people.
Isn't it different though?
In Newark versus here?
Yeah, like, cause this is the birthplace of America. We got, founding fathers here that was built on slavery and stuff. I don't think New Jersey actually had nooses.
I don't know necessarily that they did or they didn't, but we did have the riots where we practically burned the city down to the ground, and only are just now starting to see in the last decade recovery from that. And it all stemmed from an unfortunate police incident involving racist behavior by the police department. And so we've seen our share. But it's the good thing about the city of Newark now is, and I haven't been there and I didn't serve under the existing mayor, but he's always been a very community oriented individual. So he's doing something that I like to see here. And that's he's engaging the community to assist the police department. And it's always been my opinion that the police can't be successful without the support of the community.
Absolutely.
So, and it was very interesting because during the George Floyd riots throughout not only the country, but throughout the world, there were incidents in the city of Newark, and I got to see something on Facebook posted by an individual who I was very familiar with, a woman by the name of Donna Jackson. Shout out to Donna. She actually, because she was so involved with the police and so involved with the community, she was able to see when outsiders came in from that area that were trying to antagonize the police, trying to attack the police and create havoc. And she and her group of people of the community put a stop to that and didn't allow that to happen because she recognized that that's just not the way to handle it.
Nice.
So that's what we need.
Yes, indeed. And just so you know, too, we have a partnership with Charlottesville Tomorrow and Vinegar Hill Magazine. Charlottesville Tomorrow is a legacy news organization. Vinegar Hill is the longest-standing Black, started off as a newsletter for Black community, and now it's all throughout digital media. So, sort of 2017 spearheaded a collaboration, a partnership that we have with them between the radio station and those entities. So it definitely was definitely a turning point, for everyone. So we are joined by INEZ Gonzalez of the newly elected executive director for Police Civilian Oversight Board. So you definitely have a strong background, like you said, whether it's been through the internal investigations that you were part of in Jersey or whatnot. Probably the realest question that I have for you is, how transparent can you be about when folks talk about the badge, right? Or like the blue, you know what I mean? Like the network, the locker room, so to speak, of police officers. Because particularly in the Black community, that seems to be, like an issue, right? Of where you can't set apart, quote unquote, bad cops from the good cops, because then you're going to be an outcast in your, office, like within your department.
And that's a very
you seem to hit that head on. Like, so, so I'm curious how you feel about that, just atmosphere of taking on that, and like how honest and transparent, do you really feel like that a group like this could be in the city, knowing that you kind of got to call out other people within your organization, your department? I mean, that has to be tough. So I'm just curious on your thoughts on it.
That has a lot to do with who's in charge of the police department, whether it's a chief, superintendent, director. Their leadership strategies are going to have to be a huge part of that. But you're starting to see now, and I hate to keep bringing up the George Floyd incident, but the George Floyd incident actually created a lot of police reform that didn't exist before, that was badly needed. And one of the things that you saw in the Floyd incident was leadership within that police department, as well as other officers from that agency, talk about all the things that he did wrong, things that were not part of the training that he received. They were completely opposite, and they actually started speaking out. And so I think the other important factor is you're also seeing, as a result of that case, police officers that were standing by that took no action while the officer that was doing wrong were also being equally held accountable. So they suffered the same penalties as the officer that actually did the wrong. Their failure to act is something that's criminal. And then you're starting to see more and more agencies now hold officers like that accountable.
I got a tough question for you. Where does the community go wrong when they bring forth allegations against a cop? Like, I've learned from all the times that I went to court that instead of making statements, you had to learn to ask questions, right? And when you ask questions, it forces the other person to answer from where they were in that situation. Let's say I got pulled over. I felt like I was unjustly done, and I'm hooping and hollering and I'm saying, and I'm right, but I'm delivering it wrong. Where do you find that we can make our most adjustments when like we feel something needs to be looked upon? We don't want to just say it and you just sweep it under the rug, but we don't want to get belligerent to the point where it starts being looked upon the way I'm acting and not the subject that I'm talking about.
Right. And it's funny because I don't know if they have the same terminology here in Charlottesville, but where I come from in New Jersey, there's something called contempt of cop, which is not a real thing legally. But what it is that when a police officer takes an action based on the fact of how that interaction went with the citizens that they were dealing with, right? So if you're challenging him, if you're cursing him or her out or whatever have you, they then now find a reason to do something, issue you summons where they may not have, or arrest you, even though that wasn't the original intent. I think a lot of that has to do with, and it's easier said than done, right? Because if we know we didn't do, let's say go through a light, right, hypothetically, and we get pulled over by the police, that's annoying in and of itself. It's also a very highly stressful situation. My I guess stress levels go up if and when I get pulled over. It doesn't happen frequently, but it happens. Right. So we all become nervous under those situations. And so do I think that individuals need to tone it down, ask questions like you said, try to be, again, like I said, don't curse at the police officers, don't be belligerent, like you said, and ask questions, but at the same token, take notes, right? So, like I've had situations now, and I hate to discuss things that I'm dealing with now, but I have some issues, I should say it this way, with motor vehicle stops involving police. Okay. And there are certain recommendations I'm going to be making to try to address some of those things because, for example, and so it goes back to something you were saying, police officers don't like to be challenged, right? They don't like their integrity to be questioned. And so they want for, let's say when you go into a courtroom, for the judge or whoever else to take their word for it. And what happens is if you pull someone over and that initial alleged infraction is not captured on video, it's your word against the officer, right? And the officer isn't always right. And so what evidence does the individual have? And it always winds up being in a court of law, the officer's word against the civilian.
So why do we fight for constitutional rights when they really, from what you just now said, my constitutional rights aren't in the forefront when dealing with certain individuals?
But they should be. And I think, again, like I said, that still speaks to us having a lot more accountability measures for however much the police don't agree maybe with the statement that I'm making. We can't, as a blanket statement, say that police officers can be trusted to hold themselves accountable at all times. We have proven, we have seen from all the high profile incidents throughout the country that in the aggregate, right? Not speaking about individual police officers, because you have some really, really good cops out there. And unfortunately, the bad cops make it bad for everybody else. All right, but in the aggregate, we've proven already that we cannot police ourselves. And a lot of that has to do with politics. So I came from an agency, for example, that in the mid-90s had a police director that came in who was the right guy at the time. Now, he was a vicious taskmaster and he would hold us accountable sometimes to the extreme, but it's what we needed. But he didn't hold everybody accountable, meaning that if you were part of his inner circle, right, then you didn't get punished if you did something wrong. And so that erodes trust from within the agency itself. And that becomes problematic in and of itself because officers are like, well, wait a minute, not everybody gets held accountable.
We find that in task force around this part of Virginia. Like the task force seem to have a little more leeway when it comes to maybe their aggression than other officers.
Which is the other issue, right? Because there's no nationwide standards for police officers. So let's say in the city of Charlottesville, the chief that you have now could implement a whole bunch of accountability mechanisms and put them in place. But then what about when you deal with the other law enforcement agencies that also operate within the city itself, right? Because I said, my understanding, you have a city sheriff, a county sheriff. And so how do you control that? Correct.
They want to run them off the scandal. We got all that here in Virginia.
So there's no national standard, right? So you can have a police department, your local agency could be doing everything right, and you may still have an encounter, a very unfortunate encounter with other law enforcement agencies operating within the city, to include task forces made up of a little bit of everybody.
Got you.
So it's going to have to be something that, at least in my opinion, that should come down from the federal level or individual states where that accountability mechanism is put in place. But it's also my understanding in the state of Virginia, they're looking to abolish oversight. It all depends on
What exactly does that mean? Go ahead and break that down.
What, oversight?
Yeah, no, abolish oversight.
Well, meaning that depending upon who's in political power in the, I guess, the Virginia houses, right, the state houses on that level, that you may actually have politicians in place that can vote out oversight, which would mean that all the oversight agencies that were created, such as the PCOP, would be eliminated.
It's like that's infrastructure. There's infrastructure that's put in place based on what she's saying, whoever your elected officials are, but it's the accountability too, right? It's because we're living in a time to where, the system is changing, the face of the system is changing. And so, my opinion, you got a lot of folks who are trying to prevent that. Like the way that the structure was put in place needs to stay, like for the sanctity of the powers that be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it would make sight that you wouldn't want any oversight to allow you to continue corrupt systems. Right? That's why you need oversight to prevent, to try to weed out the corrupt system.
And that's why politics, though, I hate it. It becomes important for us to always stress to the people in our communities to always go out there and vote and make sure that we have the right people in positions of power so that we don't lose that level of accountability, because it's only going to revert back to where it was before.
So what's more important, in voting in the people that are going to be fair, or going after these laws and that kind of are shaded one way or left?
But you can't go after the laws unless you have the right people, that are in favor of, like, for example, police reform. You have to be in favor of police reform. Now, that doesn't mean extreme. Like a perfect example of what I considered initially to be an extreme form of police reform, and that was abolishing the police department, when they were talking about defunding the police. Right? And so defunding the police takes on different definitions depending upon who you're talking about. Right. But in the very beginning, it was like, we don't need the police. And I think that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, I've been said that.
Right.
You don't want that.
And defunding the police, for those of us old enough, for example, myself, who saw that in, I want to say, sort of like the mid 90s towards the latter part of the 90s, where we were getting a lot of money on the federal level, and we were able to hire more police officers. And then it went to actually the early 2000s, where we started losing money, and a lot of programs, a lot of training was eliminated, and that was a mistake. That was problematic, because a lot of things that would have made policing better were taken away in favor of, I guess, putting the money elsewhere. I'm not really sure.
Building prisons.
Yeah.
Which, again, building more prisons, I think the goal is to try to prevent that from happening in the first place. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it is. And the compartmentalization of it.
Wait a minute, y'all. Wait a minute.
It's just so important.
Y'all, wait a minute. We can't go. We can't go past. We're not really past that, because aren't they trying to put more money in the Albemarle County Jail?
Well, yeah, and that's my whole point. Is like she said, there's definitions of even defund, and like one good side of it, but of course I don't think it was communicated very well, is the fact that sometimes police officers get asked to do things that they shouldn't get asked to do. Right now, I feel like that you gotta pay properly, like in order to get the best. A lot of times, somebody's passion for any craft or any work is only going to take them but so far. Like they got to be properly compensated. So in that regards, I think defunding is a bad idea. We talk about we need to cut their pay and cut resources, but it is a good idea when it comes to what we need to find money and put money into certain programs, community programs and stuff, like to be able to aid, what's going
Absolutely.
on.
I agree.
Absolutely. And the issue there is, again, as far as the defunding, what I was trying to say is that we need to have better training. I think police officers need to be trained a lot longer than they are. I came from an environment where I think the academy class was, 20 weeks of training, and you're expected to learn all of the case law in the state of New Jersey, for example, all of the motor vehicle traffic violations, and that's just not going to happen in that short period of time. The state police trains for about 6 months, but they also have a higher requirement. You have to have a 4-year degree. So there's a lot of things that, that distinguish, for example, in my opinion, the level that the state police are in the state of New Jersey versus municipal police officers who get significantly less training and don't have that college requirement. So again, you almost sort of, I hate to say you get what you pay for, because that's a bad analogy when it comes to people, but you have to train them better. You have to set the bar higher. And it seems like we're making it easier for just about anybody to get on the job. And that's the kind of quality police officer you're going to get. So if you're going to set the bar lower, then you're going to have to create a lot more training. You're going to have to give them better training.
I don't think we should let anybody be a police officer that hasn't been in at least 4 fist fights in their life. Because, when you see certain videos and they pull in the gun, it's almost like the Barney Fife syndrome. and their nervousness, like you said, goes up, and they get tunnel vision, and they fear for their safety, and they're like, you know, like, I mean, if grabbing your gun is your first means of,
that's a problem.
You know, right?
That's a problem.
Like, you're not looking at taking down the person. You're not looking at tasing. You're not looking at, you know, the confrontation about it. Like, you don't want them to touch you. You don't want, like, I think, honestly, if you ain't been in 4 fist fights through high school or elementary school, you shouldn't be a police officer.
Well, every situation is different. You're right, and there are going to be certain situations where a police officer has no other choice but to draw their weapon immediately, right? Life and death, right? That's what it is. But you are right, and it's really funny because I've had this conversation with officers my age, people that have since retired, and we talk about the same thing. And I hate to say that it's true, is that we were in a lot more fights when we were coming up. Again, in my entire career, by the good grace of God, I've never had to shoot and kill anyone. But I've been in plenty of fights. I've gotten knocked on my behind, you know, a couple of times.
You look like you got a right hook.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, you gotta know how to fight. And that was just par for the course. It wasn't like, you know, again, I think it's generational also. I'm not really sure what that's about, but you're right. The first instinct shouldn't be. And there's other things that we need to look at, like part of police reform could be looking at less than lethal means. Like, for example, you've got agencies in the country that are looking at, they've got the shotguns, but they're rubber. Right. Those are the rubber pellets as opposed to actual bullets. So
kinetics or something like that.
Right. So there's different things that we need to look at. But again, accountability is a big thing. And again, I'm in favor of the body-worn cameras. I was trying to get body-worn cameras long before they were actually a thing nationwide, because I thought, in my opinion, that you could do a lot of good in terms of internal affairs by getting police officers off the hook that didn't do anything wrong simply because they had the camera to show, you know, the footage of whatever it is that transpired. But at the same token, if you had a bad cop, there would be no way for them to be able to get out of that. That's of course if, again, they activated the camera, because that's a big thing. I mean, we saw something a couple of years back where you had a police officer respond to an assignment, a burglary call at an individual's home, and actually turned off the camera right before he shot the homeowner.
Wow.
So why do we have the ability to, like, it should be when they're in their car, as soon as they get out their car, it activates and they have no ability to turn it off. Like, we can get to the moon, so to speak, but we can't make it so that you can't turn off your camera. And that makes no sense to me.
Well, and that's funny because that was actually a recent a discussion that I had. I had the same discussion. I don't see any reason. One of the, I guess, arguments against what I was suggesting of having the cameras rolling at all times was that from a storage perspective, it may be something that storage issue, or maybe cost prohibitive to have that amount of storage. I don't necessarily know that that's the case. I have not yet had that conversation with the new city manager, but it will be a conversation that we will.
I mean, we're talking about loss of life here.
Absolutely.
Like, it shouldn't even be a question as to storage, and they spend money what they want to spend money on.
And until we get to a point where we've gotten the community's trust back, we're going to have these accountability measures in place, because it can't be any more about the officer's word against the citizens. There's got to be a little bit more than that if we're going to try to rebuild the trust that through, I guess, the fault of law enforcement throughout the decades is a fault of our own.
Blows my mind is that, like, you still see some of them acting a fool, and I'd be like, don't they know cameras on?
Cell phones and everything, you know what I'm saying?
Was it the Memphis incident?
Yeah, the Memphis incident.
And you had to ask yourself, you have body-worn cameras, why would you do something like that?
But I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but that's the depth of, of this oversight, is that changing culture is hard. Like, we're here in Charlottesville, University of Virginia. People are constantly trying to change the culture that's been so deeply rooted, because of the history, of this area. And same with the police. It's like, without us even going into the history of why police forces were started and all that kind of stuff, we know that we know that there is, like, deep corruption in a lot of police departments, right? So to change that is a very heavy task. I mean, like, some would say it may even be impossible, but the least we could do is to have this oversight. But I'm curious about, like, the mental well-being, the mental health, because when I think about folks who are part of departments who do get taught, like, to shoot to kill, or they may even be in departments where they have a history of discriminating against certain communities and neighborhoods, racial profiling and stuff like that. Like, I got to imagine that there, and you may tell me that there is, I don't know, but is there some sort of, like, mental health sort of check-ins or well-being? Because to have that mind state like is an issue. You know
well,
what
I
I'm
think
saying?
the mental health issue in this country in general is clearly an issue. And in the last few years, you started to see an uptick in organizations like the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, start addressing mental health when it comes to police officers, because people forget police officers are part of the community as well. They're human beings with the same types of issues that everybody else has. They have domestic violence issues, they have financial issues, they have issues with children that are sick, spouses that are sick. So everything that you and I would experience, a police officer would experience as well.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, sometimes they take it to work. They shouldn't, but it's very difficult to be able to say that you can separate yourself from that. Some of us can do it, others can't. And so, addressing the mental health in terms of police officers is a really big thing, but it varies from agency to agency. Again, there's no nationwide standard that says this is the type of service that you have to provide. I came from an organization that we didn't have anywhere to go to if we had issues and we wanted to sit down and talk to somebody. We had to call like an 800 number and something called cop to cop, and you could speak to someone. But again, those are not mental health professionals. Those are police officers or retired police officers that receive like a little bit of training to talk to you on the phone and try to talk you down.
I think that y'all go through way more. Like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second. There are certain times when there's a necessary evil. Like, you have to have a certain level to combat certain things. I do believe in that, But also, when Charles said, there's organizations that train to shoot to kill and things of that nature, that's done long before they get to the police academy through these video games, Call of Duty and all these other things. Like, you got a child that's been playing it from 13 to 21, every day, hours on end. He's become desensitized. And some of these kids know exactly where, when you look at these shootings and stuff, they shot him in the ankle, they shot him in the, these are well-placed shots that people are putting. So you have to look. I would say when it comes to the police academy, give them a video game system. If they score too high, don't hide.
I love racist ideas.
He's going too high. I mean, for real.
But wait a minute, for clarification purposes, because again, back in I want to say probably the late 80s, early 90s, we had an incident where it was a police involved shooting. And one of the city councilmen at the time asked us, why couldn't we have just winged them, right? We don't do that. So police officers are only trained to pull their weapons in a life and death situation when they feel, like you said, imminent danger to yourself or to someone else. But when we do actually pull our weapon and intend to fire, it is to shoot to kill. That's what we are trained.
What's wrong with your taser?
Well, it depends. Like I said, each situation varies, from situation. Not every situation is going to require you pulling your weapon. And I think what it is, again, I don't know if it's a generational thing or, again, a lack of training, or I really don't know. Again, our first instinct, we didn't have those toys when I first came on.
Yeah.
We had a PR-24 when I came on, which was a step up from a nightstick. And
is that Billy Club?
Well, yeah, but the Billy Club. Yeah, well, they eliminated the Billy Club.
I know exactly what a Billy Club is.
Well, the Billy Club was a bad thing because they used it kind of like a bat, and headshots, right? So we were trying to eliminate headshots, so we wound up getting a PR-24. So that was more for like body shots and that kind of thing. But yeah, again, we didn't have a lot of the toys that you have now. So we had to either fight. That was the first course of action. You had to get physical. And if not, if you needed the PR-24, we also had, submission holds that we were trained to utilize. But so, yeah, back in the day, it was a lot more fighting. They have a lot more toys now. But it all depends. Every situation varies. And I have to tell you, I have seen recent videos, and I won't get into specifics, obviously. I don't want the chief to have a heart attack about things that I'm talking about. But it's certain videos that were shared with me that I've seen where police officers showed an incredible amount of restraint here in Charlottesville, where they actually were, one guy got punched in the face, one officer got punched in the face, and his instinct wasn't automatically to, punch the guy back or fight him or any of that. He took his taser out and he must have said like 20 times that, listen, comply or I'm going to tase you, and never used the taser. He actually waited for the officers, backup officers to come by, and they subdued him that way. So I thought that took a considerable amount of restraint on the officer's part. I don't know if a lot of that has to do with who he was as an individual, if that's part of the training here or a combination of all those things. I know if that you had hit me in the face back in the day, I was going to hit you back for sure. So
I'm going to hit you now. You got to come do your job.
But I give him a lot of credit. So in that sense, some of these guys show an incredible amount of restraint. And unfortunately others don't. But I have, like I said, right now, knock wood, Charlottesville has been subdued in comparison to what I would be accustomed to dealing with by now. By now, 3 months on the job in IA, I would have had about 100 investigations come in, excessive use of force, police involved shootings.
Now, what if we're scared at that time? Let's go from the point of the the person dealing with the police officer, right? Let's say, for instance, I feel that I'm dealing with an officer who could potentially hurt me. What do I do in that sense?
Again, I would always suggest that whenever you have an encounter with a police officer is that you attempt very hard not to antagonize the officer, to be professional, be compliant. If you notice, a lot of our issues in the Black and brown community is that we encounter police officers, and because we believe ourselves to be in the right, and a lot of times we are, we feel like we don't have to be compliant. And I think it's better for us to be compliant, right, and professional and courteous, and just take mental notes, ask the appropriate questions, because we can always challenge it down the line. You don't want to antagonize the officer right then and there. Right, have your day in court, file a complaint with the police department, come to us and make your complaint with us, or ask us to oversee the complaint that you've already made with the professional standards in Charlottesville. So there's different ways to do it, but I always believe that be compliant up front. Don't antagonize the officer. And like you said, wait until afterwards so you can have your day.
Why does compliant feel like it's a word set for Black and brown people? Because when we asked people to wear masks, it was a problem.
Correct. You're right. And I don't disagree with you. I do believe that there's a distinct difference sometimes. And for anybody that doesn't believe that, is because maybe their lived experience is different than our own. But you're right. Again, if you have, let's just say hypothetically, a white motorist that's not compliant, would the outcome be the same as it would with a non-compliant Black or brown person?
Yeah, they can talk crazy to the police. Get out the car, move all around.
Firsthand.
Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. I haven't had any experience with the Charlottesville Police Department yet, so I don't know what's going on here yet. I got to give those guys the benefit of the doubt. But I have seen it both ways. You're absolutely right. I have seen individuals and a lot of the sovereign state people that actually don't believe that they have to drive around with driver's licenses and things like that. And they will challenge the officer at every step of the way, and they get a whole lot of courtesy. Whereas, most of us would have been pulled out of the window by that point. But again, it varies from situation to situation. That isn't the case for everyone. Unfortunately, the media has a really good way of only showing us the bad things, and you never see some of the good things that police officers do. I've known officers that go into their own pockets for children, for the homeless. For things
shout
like
out to the officers that
absolutely.
That were shooting balls last week too, with the kids in the community. That was
playing putt. They got something over here. We even had an event several years ago, IMHO with Charles and Max, where we had something out at Sam's Club, and the officers out there doing cornhole with the kids and taking pictures, and those are things that I'd like to see us get back to as a community.
It's important,
but it only takes one episode to ruin all that.
It does. And that's the unfortunate thing. Like I said, you have more good cops out there than you have bad ones, but it will only take the one incident with one bad cop, and it just ruins it for everyone. And that's unfortunate, because again, it erodes trust. So right now, like I said, the climate seems to be good. People seem to be getting along. We're achieving a lot more things together right now in Charlottesville. But again, it only takes, God forbid, another situation similar to that of George Floyd for it to all, just go right back down the tubes again.
And you have a new means to try to educate and communicate as well, because unfortunately I'm talking to too many young people who see compliance on video. The world sees it, and they still get killed, still get beat. So unfortunately, we're in a time where now our education about how to deal with run-ins with law officers, now we got to convince people that that complying makes a difference.
You're right. And again, it's a very difficult argument to make when you're right, when you do have a compliant individual and somehow or another still get shot.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? And again, that's just a police officer that should never have been allowed to be one. But it's been my experience that when you look at a lot of these incidents, with a lot of these bad police shootings, high profile incidents, if you look at the officer's history, you would have seen that there was plenty of red flags long before that. And that also has to do with the leadership and accountability as well, because again, if you're monitoring your police officers, if you're identifying them through performance measures, right? So for example, where I came from, if you got 3 complaints within a 3-month period of time, you were going to flag in our system. And we were then going to send something to your commander saying, hey, listen, this guy's got 3 complaints. You need to have a conversation with him. You have to look at it, or we're going to have to turn it into a formal investigation, right? Because where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and some complaints come standard. I mean, again, and this is why, I came from a data-driven agency. And so a lot of what you do in the police department from a leadership perspective should be based on metrics that you're capturing, right? So we found out, for example, that all of the officers that were assigned to traffic duties that were giving a lot of motor vehicle summonses were to get an increased amount of complaints against them for demeanor. Nobody likes getting a ticket. And a lot of times they felt like, well, if I make an IA complaint against the officer, then I'll drop it against you, you drop it against me.
Okay.
You see, so you saw things like that. We saw police officers with the greatest amount of sick time, for example, were also bad in terms of productivity. They didn't make the least amount of arrests. They had the least amount of summonses that were issued. They were just unproductive police officers. So metrics play a really big part on how it is things should run, but that also applies to discipline. So if you see that a police officer has X number of complaints or behaves in a certain way, you have to pay attention to that and you have to correct it. And if you don't, unfortunately, you're going to get these high profile incidents because that officer will inevitably get involved in something that's going to cause a problem for the agency.
I know we probably didn't have a lot of complaints when I was coming up as a kid because we used to run. One officer couldn't pull over three of us. You know what I'm saying? We used to not telling kids to do it, but I laugh about that and make the point of officers are in much better shape nowadays. Officers come from like sports backgrounds, military, things of that nature. And I also, and this is me playing devil's advocate again, you take a person who's played football his life, been through the military, they're wired a certain way. So now when it's go time, something switches inside them. And the second that officer subdues somebody that was going to hurt other people, we're congratulating. The second that officer makes an error in judgment against a regular citizen, then we look at them like they're the worst. So I'm not trying to make, I'm not trying to make an excuse or a scapegoat for anybody. I just understand that when I've been doing this my whole life and then I transfer over to something else, y'all can actually look, police officers can look and say, okay, he's a good candidate because he MMA fights, he served a couple of tours, he defended the country, he checks good boxes. But then you put him in a situation where a threat is a threat. And a lot of times people don't look at the puppy threat versus the big growling dog threat. It's a threat and that's how I'm gonna deal with it. So how can we ever, like Charles said, how can we ever get to a point where we can kind of coexist and be happy with the outcome when it takes a certain level of something to, I don't want Barney Fife showing up to help me. You know what I'm saying? I want RoboCop if I need him, right?
But like we said earlier, though.
But you don't want RoboCop pulling.
I don't want RoboCop pulling me over.
Right.
So how do we ever get to a point?
Earlier, though, like some things come with the territory. Chris Rock said the best. Some jobs you can't be bad at. Like it or not, there's some jobs you can't be a bad pilot.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be a bad police officer.
Don't get me wrong, a police officer shouldn't be judged by their worst day or by by a bad day. But unfortunately, if that worst day happens to be for example, a police involved shooting or in custody death that was unjustified, it just is what it is. And like you said, there's certain jobs you just can't be bad at. And it's unfortunate
but we're asking them to be perfect.
Well, and we're never going to get perfection. But I've always looked at it from this perspective. If we strive for perfection and fall just shy of that, then the product that we're producing is acceptable.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
That time went fast.
That was a great, rich conversation.
Absolutely.
I definitely appreciate you being here. But any final words for the community as far as how they can be more supportive? Because I'm definitely curious on like your outreach mechanisms. Like thankfully I saw you at the Chiamba African American Cultural Arts Festival.
I've been making my rounds. I've been trying to get involved in all the community events with our swag that I've been purchasing that has all of our information, whether it's the website, the telephone number to contact us. I've been meeting with organizations, for example, like the People's Coalition. They've been very helpful and supportive. So basically, I just need the community to get involved. The PCOB meets in city space under normal circumstances. The second Thursday of every month.
Okay.
So I just want people to get more involved in the programs that the police department has and the PCOB as well. And the police department, it's my understanding, is going to be coming up with a Citizens Academy soon. So if they have any questions on that, they can feel free to reach out to, for example, Sergeant Thomas outside of the CPD. He's involved. I think he's in charge of the Community Affairs Division, and ask about something. I need the community to stay involved, to stay on their toes. and to keep the police officers on point.
I also want to say this: we need you to stay involved too. So after you made your connections, we still need you to make your round.
Oh no, that's a given. That's again where I came from. Community involvement was key, and I know that better than anybody. You can't be successful without the assistance of the community.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you once again, and feel free to tag us and and share any communications that we can help get to the public.
I surely will.
So we have been joined by Inez Gonzalez, Executive Director for the Police Civilian Oversight Board, and IMHO family. As we said, we're going to keep connecting you, doing what we do.
Absolutely,
Sir Charles. Razor, stay tuned. We got another hour show. We will be joined by the Respect the Neighbors campaign. They're going to be back to talk with us once again, get some updates on what's going on, particularly with 10th and Page, and how we can stay vigilant in our communities. All right. Tell a friend, IMHO Talk Show. Be right back.
Great job. Great job. Great job.
Awesome.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
AMAHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Axilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 GAMS.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 GAMS.
There we go. There we go. What you think, Razor?
Excuse me, man.
What you think, Razor?
Reach in front of you and whatnot. I think we're about to have a very, very interesting hour.
Yes, indeed.
You know, I'm looking forward to this. You know, like there's so much about the individuals that's here now that assumption, and it's good, but there's nothing like hearing something come from the actual person themselves. So I'm looking forward to this next interview.
Yes, indeed. And Razor's talk, you know, bringing it up as if y'all are newcomers. Y'all have been here before. Zai been here many times. Ms. V was here before. So we let the listeners know. But Razor wasn't here last time y'all were here, you know. So I'll let him off the hook.
I listen. I listen.
You listen?
And
okay.
it's not about their amount of times that they've been here on the airways. It's about the continued work that they're doing.
You're right. I'm just giving you a hard time, but we are.
Give me no hard time. I'm ready. I like it, rough.
We are joined. Y'all excuse me. we are joined by Respect the Neighbors campaign, none other than Zayana Bryan and Ms. Vizina Howard. How are y'all this afternoon?
Good. Thank you so much for having us.
For sure.
Doing well, thank you.
For sure, anytime. Definitely, as we had such a rich conversation last time, along with Mr. James Bryant joined us as well, and we said we were going to have you back because when we left off, you had some community meetings and different things planned, different action items planned to carry forth the advocacy for the 10th and Page neighborhood, specifically, under the Respect the Neighbors campaign. Let's just back up just a little bit, because I'm sure there's some folks who just may not be up to speed. So if you would just go ahead and give our listeners a brief history of what brought the Respect the Neighbors to be organized.
Okay. So basically, Respect the Neighbors emerged after the July 25th meeting that happened, where the dairy market expansion kind of proposal was laid out for the community to look at and to give their opinions and their responses to. And, I think what was evident during that meeting was that, one, there was a real lack of community engagement from Stony Point Development and the, related architects and designers of that project. But also that there was, this real distrust with the group, with the architect and with the development group, and between them and the neighbors. And there just wasn't enough kind of rapport building and relationship building with those folks. And so, what I've seen over the past couple of weeks as we have been leading this campaign, there have been people who are saying, well, they're making the neighborhood better. And, why is there this responsibility for developers to engage with the surrounding neighbors or the community that they are building in and planning in? And, my response is simple, that, 10th and Page is a very rich historical and cultural space in our city. And there's so much history that's happened there. And, if you even ride through 10th and Page, you see the makeup of the neighborhood. You see some of the folks who are gathering and interacting with each other, sitting on their porches, having cookouts, just typical neighborly things on the surface. But then beneath it, there's this history of resilience. There's this legacy of home and place building and place holding. And I think that is something that is often lost when you look at a neighborhood on the surface and you see, oh, this is a Black neighborhood, and you hear some of the narratives that are said about the space, but you don't actually know people who are raised there, people who live there. That disconnect is a part of the problem. So I feel like that is why there needs to be a process where those who are running the dairy market in its current state, in its current form, phase 1 and 2, those people who are in charge of that space should be, knowledgeable about the history of the space, and also should be knowledgeable about the people who live there. And so that there can be that good neighborly kind of relationship between the dairy market and also those who live around it.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And Ms. V, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. So can y'all share with us, since you were here last time, what organizing has been done? Because I know you've invited the community out to meet and chat.
Yes, we have been having meetings, on top of meetings, not just neighborhood association meetings, but meetings with a certain amount of folks where we can get more to the group of what vision we would like to see. What we would talk to Chris about, we got to work together on this. And then instead of you coming to us to saying this is what it's going to be, and that's it's like that. Like Fightville, they was going through some issues with their project, and we've learned a lot from talking to them. Also, some things that we need to do, and also because they evidently Chris group did not know any history of our neighborhood. When we asked them about Vinegar Hill, they was like, Vinegar Hill. That was something we never studied or knew about. And that's bad because they're coming into our neighborhood and there's a lot of history there.
Yeah, if you don't know your history,
exactly. So, they need to go back and do some studying also. I mean, you bring contractors from out of town, they have no idea. They just say, we're building this and that's it. But you got to think about the people that's there in the community and what we would like to see still being there because it's history there.
Yeah. Now, Zai, you said something very, very poignant earlier when you said that some people say that they're actually making the neighborhood better. That's the word you use. So, like, to me, like, that was one thing that was top of my mind as far as like the crux of our conversation today is the role that we all play. Because to a certain extent, you know, like growth, development, like it's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
Like, so from your perspective, like how do you foresee the community and the developers working together versus it being opposed to each other?
Well, before I answer that question, let me add to some of the advocacy efforts that we've taken. So we did city council. That was 2 weeks ago. And we had so many people come out to city council. And I would encourage those who may not have watched the meeting thus far, go ahead on the City of Charlottesville government Facebook page and watch that city council meeting. I mean, we had speaker after speaker speak on the fact that we need to pay attention to this project, even though it's not a current, you know, consent agenda item, it's not an action item before council. We are giving council a heads up that, hey, when this comes across your desk, once it goes through the planning commission process, once they put in for their SUP, we want you to be aware of how we feel about this. We are being proactive because, you know, the biggest thing that folks always say is, well, where were y'all when they were doing XYZ? Y'all came too late. It's too late. It's already happening. So we're trying to get ahead of that. So we had about, I want to say 100 people come out to city council, maybe 80. And then the following day, so we had a double header, I would call it. We had planning commission the next day. We also packed planning commission, but there was also another kind of hot topic item on the agenda too, which brought out a lot of community folks. But again, telling the planning commission, even though you don't have an application or a site plan in front of you at this moment, we want you to know how we feel about this so that when you do get that and you are able to review those documents, you can think about some of the stories and the narratives that you heard from the neighbors directly. Now, to answer your question about kind of the role that we play and what we want that kind of developer and neighbor kind of relationship to look like, I think it's a co-creative one. And I remember saying that to Chris during that July 25th meeting. There is this need for co-creation, not just with developers, but also with decision makers, those who are running our elected bodies, school board, city council, whatever may have you. I mean, it is their responsibility to not just represent folks based on what they think people are voting for. Because you cast your ballot, but that's only the top. That's only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more engagement work that we as voters and we as active citizens should be doing. But I think the problem is that once people do bring an opinion that may be different from the person who's supposed to be representing them, it's like that they hear it and then that's it. But there needs to be, you know, an actual reflection of their consideration of what neighbors are saying in their actions. So I think for developers, if you're hearing, you know, the dairy market, the restaurants you have in there are too highly priced, or the shops that you have in there, people who live in this neighborhood can't even afford it. It's like, well, then how can we really come to the table with you if you don't have any Black businesses in there right now? Because, you know, Angelique has left. You don't have anything that's really affordable, and even the apartments aren't affordable. Then what does that relationship actually look like? So I think that that's where the co-creative process comes in, where it's like inviting the neighbors in at the earliest stages of any ideas or project, and then, you know, letting them have a seat at the table to help say, okay, this is not only what we want, but this is something that we would be likely to actually support. Like, you know, if you put more Black-owned businesses in there, we'd be more inclined to actually buy from this place. And then, like, we think about the Fiveville project, like they're going to have a grocery store at the bottom of that space. And we talk about food deserts, or, you know, there's new terminology now around that, but neighborhoods that don't have access to fresh food within a certain amount of like square footage or square miles, that's important to think about. So now those neighbors, since they came to the table with that developer, now they'll have an actual community asset. And I know one of the big things that we've been talking about is a laundromat. And a lot of the neighbors are, you know, afraid and concerned about that leaving because it's a real necessary asset for the neighborhood. So, you know, I think that that's kind of, you gain that sort of insight when you're having those conversations with those people.
Now bring us up to speed in regards of what the ultimatum is, right? Because you know, most people have heard the stories about, like, there's been elders that's received checks in the mail saying, if you cash this, you know what I mean, like we'll, you know, like we'll take ownership of your property, whatever it says. Like, so what is the ultimatum on the table to make sure that everybody understands as far as like them developing and then, you know, like taking over a certain space, but you know, versus them just saying, okay, like we have the dairy market area and like these are the shops, these are, you know, like luxury condos in it and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Like so what are the options that they're even giving the citizens of the community right now? You know what I mean?
Nothing really.
No options.
No options.
It doesn't
like
feel
just,
like
you
it.
just find your own place, like not even
Exactly.
You know.
And the vouchers, the vouchers doesn't even count. They say they accept the voucher, but then they're gonna say you're $50 short. You can't, you still can't rent to you. So they're not really helping the community at all.
And when we say $50 short, we mean the kind of income to rent ratio that you have to have, or the credit kind of requirements, credit score requirements to live in those apartments. So I don't see them saying like, oh, these are the options that we have. What I saw was, this is the project that we are going to build, and either y'all can get information and afford it, or y'all can continue to not be able to be in that space. And I don't want to, I didn't lose sight of the incident that happened where apparently like neighborhood kids like took over the pool, and there was like on Nextdoor app. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Nextdoor app or the site, but someone was like, oh, you should call the police, you know? And I don't know if I believe that it was said that like Dairy Market has sent an email to residents saying like, if you see this, call the police. And it's like, that's not good neighborly, you know, kind of vibes or, you know, or kind of like relationship building. So at the end, and why is it not? Because again, it's not just about calling the police for disruptions, but also because like there's a long history of the Charlottesville Police Department specific to 10th and Page neighborhood. And again, that's why knowing that history and knowing the neighbors is so important, because you don't get all of those nuances just by thinking about it on a surface level.
Right. And I know Razor has something for you too. I'm not sure if you're taking a different direction, Razor, but but I got so many things, because I know, you know, even like a lot of our listeners have been, you know, have chimed in as well since the last time you were on, and you know, things you see on social media and whatnot. So from the, like, what is being shared with the citizens, you know, as far as them organizing and protecting their properties. And what I mean by that is because like we know a lot of times with gentrification, what happens is, and really this is where the city comes into play as well, on how like they zone and whatnot, the rules around that. But you know, but it makes me think about if we, or you know, the neighborhood is organized and has an understanding of how to face it, then they can't literally take the property unless the city then like sort of co-ops with the developers and tries to condemn, you know, the houses within the neighborhoods. So I'm curious, like, has there been talk around that of just sort of communicating, look, let's hold our ground. They're going to be trying to pressure you to sell. You know what I mean? Because selling is different from there being like zoning that's condemning you out of your house. You know, any thoughts around that?
Well, we know the zoning is getting ready to change also. So we're having a meeting to learn more about the zoning process, as far as working with the housing project too. So that's something we having meetings to learn about all the zoning that's getting ready to happen in that area. As far as they putting up this housing, what we would like for them to do is not to go 7 stores, but maybe 5 stores. You know, and then put more community involvement things into the project.
So what she's referring to is more of a mixed use, where we're, you know, advocating for mixed use. But even when it's mixed use, right, even when there are these promises that it will be affordable, I think Tanisha Hudson says this a lot. We need to really demystify what affordable means. We need to put very clear parameters around that. When we say affordable, I'll say, me and my nana have had this conversation. We mean 30% AMI. That's what we're talking about, because affordable at 30% AMI means that those with those housing vouchers, those who are in subsidized housing can afford it, right? But once you get up into the 60% AMI, it's on a scale of between 100 and 110,000. So that being your yearly income, 60% of that is, that's still up there. You still making a pretty good wage at that point, but most people are not making that, especially within our neighborhood. So, but around your question around how are we, you know, equipping ourselves with the language, with the knowledge to be able to protect our homes and to preserve, you know, that neighborhood and that community feel that we've grown to know. I think that I'm very interested in that personally. And we just had a meeting this past week. We had a neighborhood meeting, and I was really clear about the fact that I think that that is a 100% urgent need for us, because we see it feels like every couple months we see someone either selling their home or new folks moving in. And there's nothing wrong with the neighborhood being diverse. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that, you know, we're getting our houses under appraised. We're getting, you know, these small checks for this. And honestly, you know, people are saying the dairy market is improving our neighborhood. And I think that's a two-sided thing, right? It's making folks' taxes go up to the point where they can no longer afford to remain in their home. But it is, if the tax is going up, that means the property value is going up. So there's also opportunity, but you have to be able to understand that opportunity. And honestly, you have to be able to afford it, right? You only benefit if you're still able to afford the upkeep of your home. So I think that those are the types of conversations we want to have. And I scrolled across something that Piedmont Housing Alliance is doing with starting this, the land trust and, you know, all of the work that's happening there. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. Like, how can we talk to Black families about what it looks like to not just talk about generational wealth of buying the house? Because that's just, again, the tip of the iceberg. There's how do we actually keep it in the family, like putting it into trust and having those sort of conversations. And, you know, we're having folks come in and talk to us and give us some of those ideas and giving us like some of the resources so that we can educate ourselves around it. And I foresee Respect the Neighbors is, again, not just about opposing dairy market. It's so much bigger than that. It's about understanding how we do our part as neighbors to build community, and also how we educate ourselves about how to advocate for that neighborhood and for that community. So that is 100% a part of it. And to anyone who's listening who has that information, if you're a realtor, if you're someone in the area who knows how to go about these sort of legacy planning, legacy building type of techniques, I would welcome you to reach out to respecttheneighbors@gmail.com. We have flyers up on our social media. If you follow at @BlackGirlBuilders_ on Instagram, reach out to us, because we would love to arrange some sort of informational meetings or trainings for the neighbors.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes. I have a question. What if, hypothetically speaking, if they don't want to integrate with us, they only want to integrate with our money, they really don't want us there? How would we approach that? Because sometimes you can be having a conversation with somebody that really, because they decide not to answer, apologize, or do anything else, they're really telling you, I really don't want you here, and I want pretty much how America was built, and take what it is that I want. If I pay for it, I decide who's here.
Right.
I don't want to have to give opportunity for somebody that I really don't want here. What happens if that conversation never gets had?
You know, I think that that is something that we've already seen. If you look at Vinegar Hill, if you look at the history of other neighborhoods in Charlottesville, we are not new to that at all. And I think that the difference between that then and now is that I think we tried our best with the information we had. I think our elders, our ancestors, they did their best. And I'll never take away from that. You know, folks say I'm not my ancestors. They were way more organized and way more resilient than a lot of us. Right. But I think that that's a great question. And, you know, my perspective may not be the best to say on air, but I believe that we're going to fight as much as we can to do what we need to do for our neighborhoods and for our community. And I'm open to taking all sorts of methods to do so.
And the last question, where are the men? I see so much being done by you sisters. And I know that y'all may not want to throw Black men under the bus, you know, but everything can't be led by a doctor such and such, or a haircut, or 100 Black man, one of the 100 Black men, you know what I'm saying? Where are the regular men? Are they reaching out to y'all? And if they are, why are they not standing in front of you, beside you, or wherever their place may be?
Oof, I have a lot to say on this, Nana. You can go first.
We do have a few men behind us that will come to our meetings, help us, give us their voice count. You know, they have good ideas, things going on. And we have two that really is faithful. They're right there with us. Anything we want to find out, they'll find the information out for us. So we do have a few, but it's a lot more we could have.
I think my perspective is that I've seen this particularly since 2017. Charlottesville is so extremely tribalistic, and people only want to support, their cousin, their best friend, whatever. And I have run into that so much as a Black girl. I started my work when I was in middle and high school, and I was expecting a lot more support from particularly, Black men in the community. And what I saw is a lot of people see Black women, especially young, courageous, resilient, and brilliant Black girls and Black women as threats. And it's like a whole lot of times, even my work, I speak to my own work. I started this work in a rally call for justice for Trayvon Martin. I was fighting for, a young Black boy's life. And since, we're talking about Mike Brown, Philando Castile, there's so many unarmed Black men that Black women have led that charge for. And so I think that, I'm always open to collaborate. And I've even talked to some, younger millennial Gen Z Black guys who I'm like, we support y'all stuff. We give to y'all toy drives. We give to y'all's fundraisers. And then when we popping out with something, the most we get is a like on Facebook, not even a repost to, get other people involved. And it is hurtful. I will say it's actually, if we're going to be, very honest, it is hurtful because it's like, we put so much time into this. I was talking to one of my friends last week. I had meetings from 3:30 and I didn't get home until after 9:30. And that was all for neighborhood organizing. And throughout that day, I only saw one Black man. And that was Justin Reed, So it's like, we have some really good ones who are really solid and who do show up. But I think it's gonna take a lot of we have our own inter-community healing that we need to do as Black folks. And I think that shows in moments when it's time for us to show up as a united front, but we haven't done that work on our own end to show up as a united front. So it's like, and honestly, to be honest, I feel like a lot of those people, like you said, the people who don't want to come to the table with us, or the people who said, I'm buying it, whatever, they thrive off of that kind of friction, and they thrive off of us not getting along and not being a united front. So there are, some people who are Black and who can be bought out, and by a low price or a high price, they're ready to do the bidding of white supremacy for a check. And so, that's just reality.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the tribalism that you mentioned is so real and so true. And that actually rings true across different demographics. One thing that I think that we need to do, let me back up by saying is because of, there's a lot of pressures, especially us being Black people, and then when you're leaders, people are coming for your head.
Oh, right? Every time.
So there's so much stress within itself besides that. And that's why I said that it rings true across all demographics, because we have been trained to then take it out on
the person close to you.
Yeah, on the person, there you go. Take it out on the person closest to us. Instead of our problem, instead of addressing the one that's responsible for our problem, we can't get to them. Or they may write a check, or we may be fearful of them for whatever reason, so we take it out on those close to us. And I think that as a people, you're absolutely right. Tribalism definitely has to stop. But I was getting that at first. My first thought was going to be when it comes to a generationally, because when you talk about being a young girl, when you're a teenager and all that stuff, it's like we still have to figure out how to have the useful exuberance along with the older wisdom, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes because something is different, some folks that may be a little older, they may be a little fearful. They may look at it like you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't lived long enough. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. But there has to be a fine line somewhere, and I think we still need to figure that out.
Yeah.
Where that line is.
Right now, it's good try.
I think I'm so grateful for people like Mr. Bryant, who was here last time, and then all of the elders in the neighborhood who are giving me their stories, trusting me to make sure that, we're doing what we can as young people who, may have a little bit more time or a little bit more energy to do some of that kind of boring, just process type of work. I'm glad that they're giving us the opportunity to lead. And they really are following our lead. They're like, y'all know about this. How do we leverage this? How do we use social media? How do we use all the tools to reach people who are in Gen Z and to get them involved? I think that that is why we started this kind of collective called Black Girl Builders, which is doing a lot of the advocacy, training and facilitation work for this Respect the Neighbors campaign. And it was to bring those elders to the table with the youngest folks, the youngest Black girls in the community, to have some of those conversations, whether it's over a community dinner, whether it's about, you know, an upcoming thing that we need to talk about at a public meeting, like having them together so that they can exchange and they can build community amongst themselves. And I think that, you know, that is something that we really are missing. And, you know, we have to respect people who just aren't in our family, not just our grandparents. We got to respect every elder, you know, in the community who has something to say, even if we disagree. And so I think that that's something that we definitely should be doing. But when the most marginalized people, when the Black women, when the Black girls, when the Black boys are doing well, the entire community benefits. And, you know, we talked about that the other day when we were in that meeting on Friday, like when we reach out to the corners, everybody gets to benefit from those corners being well supported. So, you know, I hope that moving forward, there will be more opportunities for young people to lead. So I think we're ready, and I think we have a lot of great ideas. But like you said, we still have to respect the wisdom of those who came before us.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out how to say this like respectfully, and y'all really don't have to comment on this. As I listen to y'all talk, it seems like y'all disappointed by the Black male. Like, I mean, and I'm not asking you to respond because I don't want you to develop any enemies just because they, you know, but it's hard. Me and Charles had this conversation before. It's hard for a demographic to grow when their men aren't leading the charge. Not saying that you have to step back, but from what I'm hearing and the people that you're trying to pour into, which you would consider to be the future, I'm hearing almost that the Black male is almost ill-equipped to lead our communities anymore. Now, I know some of y'all guys gonna get upset at me, and y'all don't come for me, you know me, you know what I'm saying? But I'm listening to two African-American sisters that one I should be respecting, the other I should be protecting. But if my community has made it to the point where my image does not have the value that it should, then how can we grow collectively? Y'all can choose to answer that if you would like to.
It's definitely.
Yeah,
Grandma, don't call no
she
name.
said you're gonna say a name. Oh Lord.
Yeah, don't call no name, please.
So you opening up that can of worms.
No, but like one thing I would add to that though is that like I would disagree with the ill-equipped part. Like I think it's just more.
No, I'm talking about perception. No, I'm talking about the Black female perception.
Right.
Not that we are uneducated, not that we not doing work, not that we try, but honestly, Charles, I see it when it comes to the child support system. You know, like if women felt like they could go to the man and have an honest conversation about what they need for them and the child that they share, then it wouldn't be as much a need to go to court to get. So, I mean, we got to pull teeth sometime and say, okay, like I know dudes that come to me and say, hey, cuz, let me work underneath the table. Child support taking all my money. I can tell y'all, if y'all listening, I'll never hire you. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll never hire you. And that's because you're ducking the biggest responsibility God could ever give you, and that is half of yourself. And if you'll do that to yourself, I know what you'll do to me.
So what I wanted to chime in with before Zai gives her comments on it is that. Like this, honestly, this is one of the reasons why I disagree when we come at each other like in public, because I feel like as a people we should be able to text or call and be like, yo, we need to talk, because I believe that the devil rejoices like when we in public got to the food of each other and instead of resolving our things like we used to. You know what I mean? Like whether it was through church or whether it was at like a community function or whatever, it was like we had that sense of where we come together and we iron things out. You know what I mean? Like behind closed doors amongst our people. You know what I mean? You know, but I say all that just because I feel like societally there's been wedges, you know, pushed in between us. Like I think it's been purposeful for the Black man, like to be like beaten down upon a lot, to where, and it's not an excuse, but for them to be treated as such, so that their woman would look at them lesser. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's systematic, like through the history of this country. And I feel like what we're seeing now is a culmination of that, to where a lot of Black men either don't feel like that they're going to be respected and don't speak up or show out. And the fact is, unfortunately, our women have had to carry our load because of that.
Well, you know, we talk about gender politics, and I don't think that we can have that conversation about the ways that Black men have been oppressed from various systems and, you know, societal practices without speaking about the fact that, but Black feminism tells us that Black women typically go and clean up that mess, right? When they are oppressed, they can go to Black women to get that support that they need. And that's well documented, right? And we see it even within our social movements. Ella Baker was leading. Fannie Lou Hamer was leading. Anna Julia Cooper was leading. And they weren't getting the support that they were due. And that's why now, 60 plus years later, we're just finally hearing their names, right? And so I think that, you know, it's not about recognition, but it's about understanding the ways that power dynamics trickle down through institutions and on a horizontal level within our community. And I mean, like, you're talking about what I majored in. Like, this is my thing. So I'm like, we can go on and on, but I do think that on a more practical level, you know, when we're talking about just showing up in community, I will never take away from, again, the brilliance and the work that's happening by Black men, and particularly those who are millennials in our community. Like, they're doing some great work for Black boys, right? But, and all I'm saying is, do that work for Black boys when you're in the room where grants are being discussed, where resources are being pushed around and redistributed. Say that, oh, I know a Black woman who's also doing this work, and I also want her work to be funded as well. I also want this Black woman to have access to these same spaces. And that's all we're asking for, right? And I feel like Black women naturally do that for Black men. We get a call, hey, you know, I have this need, this kid in middle school needs this, can you help? And it's no question, literally no question. But I don't feel like that energy is reciprocated. And that has been one of my challenges, because I don't want it to turn us as young Black women, especially, into people who are just like, well, they don't support us, so we're not going to support them, because that's counterproductive, right? But we still have to have that accountability. And so when you talk about calling people up and calling in, I'm all about call in versus call out. Do the call in first, call out second. But then some folks thrive off of the call in, because you tell them on the phone, hey, I'm not rocking with how you're doing it. But then they go out into the public and they still hold down that persona or whatever, that they're saving the world, but everybody, the Black women are holding their tongue because they're like, I don't want to destroy their image. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But we know amongst ourselves who's showing up to help us and who is not. And I think that is, it's been a long time type of friction and conflict. And it's something that won't be solved today or tomorrow or just with Charlottesville. This is a problem across the world for Black women. And thank you for that. And I totally agree. Like, but that's the discernment, you know, like when Reza and I talk about this, that I always try to draw, because like you said, there are, you know, Black men that are doing amazing work, but where I see like the more, like the stronger contrast is that, like, when it comes to not just leading, because a lot of us show up if we're the ones getting patted on the back. That's what I'm talking about. Like, but the women, like you said, the women will show up and show out to help because the help is needed, not because I'm in charge. In the home conversations that we're sitting in people's living rooms and organizing and planning, when it's needs that don't even make it to Facebook, I need this. Because Black women have already discussed it amongst ourselves and handled it in group chat. So it's just like, like when there are no cameras or when there's no pictures being taken, who can we really count on to be there? And not just for their own personal gain. Because some folks will say, oh, well, I did call that person behind the scenes. But were you calling them to get information to get your next business off the ground? Or were you calling to actually show up and support them?
Right, spot on.
Yeah, I know y'all ain't getting no Christmas gifts, right?
And that's fine. We get our own.
Yeah, but we are joined with Zayana and Zeta of Respect the Neighbors. Wow, it's, you know, I always know it's going to be a good conversation whenever we have you up here. Well, but did you have something else?
Nope.
Okay, cool.
I ain't following it. I'm good.
Like, I'm trying to pass
I'm sitting over your grandma. Yeah.
No, but the accountability. So that's where my mind was going, because say all that, like, to kind of really bring it back home to the, you know, to the 10th and Page neighborhood. And, you know, and I love having that sort of detour that we just had, because I'm all about the accountability and me being a Black man, like, you know, calling my brothers to task is something that I feel like is necessary. And when you love each other, you should be able to do it in a respectful way, right? You should know it's out of love. And so same thing though, when it comes to the accountability of when we talk about our citizens there, like within the neighborhood. Kind of get your take on this. So one thing that gets me is that like, we're not a monolith.
Right.
Right. Like as a Black people, we have different belief sets, what have you, like different backgrounds, whatever. Not a monolith. So I feel, tell me, you all's thoughts, but I feel like that we need to be more careful, like when we're in the meetings, like with the developers, and not even just that meeting, but that's the nucleus of what we're talking about today, of when we say we and when we say Black people. Because again, if we're not a monolith, I think we have an issue sometimes that we need to resolve when it comes to the fact of the matter is there are some of us that are making decent salaries and wages and that are from the city and that can afford things that like Berry Market and like other developments are offering. I think that we need to have serious conversations about the framework around that, of knowing that, and it's a trust issue too. It's a trust issue of that when some of us have made it, quote unquote, made it, or can step foot into certain doors, to know that we are going to create the safe space for everybody else to come on.
That's the part.
But too many times either we don't do that, or on the other side we have a fear that they're selling out or that they don't have our best interests at hand. So I feel like internally that's something that if we fix that, I feel like we can then maybe be a part of development. That's what I want to see. Like I don't want us to always have the conversations of like it's us versus them. I want us to figure out how we buy in and benefit from development.
Now, hold on. The only thing I want y'all to add to that, just like y'all said, we say we're not monolithical people, but often our answers are, I knew they was going to do that. Yep, that's just like them. So if we're not monolithical people, how is it that we almost know what that person's going to do before they do it? That's the only thing that kind of, I used to say that too. I don't say it anymore because if your actions show, I know what you're capable of, right? But that doesn't exclude you from what work that you do or decide to do. So we might be more monolithical than we actually want to admit to.
And I think that oftentimes when we say Black people aren't monolithic, that's in reference to their personal politics. Typically it's like, yeah, you either had this set of life conditions that raised you in a different space, so you don't have the same experiences as me, and therefore you don't have the same political ideologies. But I think like when it comes to Charlottesville, Charlottesville is 13% Black. And when we look at the average income, the median income for Black people in Charlottesville, because that's not the same as the average income for everybody else in Charlottesville. Right. So I think, there is kind of, it's not a common kind of experience that we have, but we do know that there are a small few who are in the decision-making spaces and who are earning a high enough salary to really be able to make something shake on that level where we're talking about developers. It's a very small few amount of people. And so I think that that's where we're trying to, when we say we and we say Black, we're thinking about, again, our politic is to center the people who are furthest at the margin. So the people who are earning the very least, because when we support them, everybody else in between, all the way up to the highest salary for Black people benefit. So I think that is where when we say we, that is our collective language that we're using. But it is true. There are some Black people who can afford to get into those condos, apartments, whatever may have you. But like you said, sometimes they get into those spaces and they're so worried because let's be clear, making it to the top or making it in Charlottesville never means that your spot is solidified. And so there's always going to be somebody who's trying to see how they can get you out of that. It's when it comes to income and it comes to elitism, nobody's ever safe unless you are of the dominant power holders, unless you are white. So I think it's important for us to think like when you do make it, I don't think some people kind of go back and forth about whether we should say they have a responsibility to look out for those who, they grew up with or who grew up in their neighborhoods and whatever may have you. I honestly feel like just based on my own politics, I do feel like we have a responsibility to reach back and say, okay, how can I make conditions better for you since I was able to maneuver through these systems? Right. So I think that when you have that perspective, you would enter into the rooms with the best interest of those who are also Black, but who are making way less anyway. But some people just don't have that perspective because they're just worried, about how to keep themselves afloat. And that's also valid. And I don't want to take away from that. So, I mean, yeah, I think that there should be more cross kind of community conversations, not just people in Page. There should be Black people who live on Park Street. Y'all should also be talking to us too. We can organize as a collective. And I think this particular campaign has been very clear that we're willing to come to the table with anyone. But you're also not just gonna, have us tell our stories and use them for something else, because there's this history of extraction where it's like, we just want to listen and we just want to take your story and maybe even your house, and we want you to be okay with it. And we're not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, here stuff. Ms. Virginia, you've been quiet for a few minutes.
She's a spokesman. She's got it.
She got it.
She's bringing it out there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So we are joined by Zayana, Brian, and Ms. Fazina. How respected neighbors. So when's the next? Is there another community meeting scheduled that folks should know about?
Well, we just had our neighborhood meeting Wednesday night. So the next meeting would be September the 23rd, something like that. But it's a planning thing in between that. Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, and as soon as you share, we'll definitely make sure folks know.
In the meantime, we are asking that people show up on City Council, either in person or call into the Zoom, and just let them know that you're thinking about this project, you're thinking about the things we're talking about, and that you are an ally of ours. I mean, showing up in numbers either in person or on Zoom, it really does work wonders, and it shows those decision makers that people are paying attention.
Yep. Sounds good. And I my mind is still wrapped around this. So this is something that we can bookmark. Future conversation. But it's like so many times. As Black people, as a community, we run into these issues of when we see that culturally, we're being impacted and we're being discriminated against, right? Or we're being profiled for whatever reason. But then it always brings to light for me some of the internal fixes that we still need. You know what I mean? And while that's sad on one hand, but at the same time, it brings hope, because there's still attention to it. There's still, freedom fighters and still activists, that care about our people and they care about our culture. But I just say all that because
But we all need to care.
Yeah, we all need to care. Yeah.
One thing about Dairy Market, the whole system is, when we asked them about were there any African American employees, that had any authority or anything like that, there's not one. They did mention, but we have some ambassadors. Okay, but the ambassadors are the ones that's cleaning up your mess. They're not making any decisions, and that was one hurtful thing right there. They didn't have not one of us that has any authority in the whole building, All they can say, well, we have ambassadors.
Okay. Or they also said the person who oversees the ambassadors, but again, not in the real decision-making spaces that would make decisions that impact the kind of trajectory of the project.
Yeah. So that brings me back to mind, the mixed use piece. Do we think that that's realistic, though? Or should there be separate development, sort of based on the neighborhood that the shops are in? You know what I'm saying? Because it's because it's complex. I'm trying to simplify it, knowing that it can't be but so simple. Right. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's if they're trying to turn that whole area into a town center, or something, that's kind of what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like a big town center. We have these housing developments around it. That's that all are sort of upscale. So it's Charlottesville isn't but so big. So what I'm getting at is when we talk about mixed use, it's almost you kind of need space for that, but then you also need space that's a little more indigenous to the people that are already there.
Mixed use has worked some places, right? There are some places in DC, and other places, Northern Virginia, where mixed use has worked. But I think in those cases, there were big kind of nonprofit advocacy groups that were able to be at the table, who had their ear to the ground, who took a grassroots approach to who they were representing at that decision-making table, and who spoke up in their best interest. But again, getting back to the tribalism of Charlottesville, when the chosen Black person, who may by the grace of God have the opportunity to be in that room, if they're only looking out, well, I'm trying to scale our business and not I'm actually deeply engaged with those who are the most marginalized, then again, those perspectives are not going to be represented, and they may seem that they're in the best interest of all of Black Charlottesville, or the majority, but it may very not be that. That may not be the case, especially if those folks are not really in the community anyway, right? You just kind of see them when it's, like you said, either cameras or or an opportunity for them.
And that's sort of the sort of the crux of my question is like those two things meshing. You know what I mean? Like that's my hope, is the two things meshing of the Black businessman, like that may still be in it for profit, but at the same time
looks out for the interest.
He's still looking out for the interest, and like, but there's still that trust there, and the only way that trust is going to be built is if the people are done right. Because if it's constantly being done wrong, then you can't expect anybody to trust you.
What did Maya Angelou tell us when somebody shows you who they are the first time? That's all I'm gonna say on that.
That's real. That's real. But thank y'all. Thank y'all for the fight. Yeah, we like I said, we're going to continue to support and share the information, as we get it. So Zayana, Mazina, thank y'all once again.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. We hope to continue on with this journey, and next time we might have a little more detailed information for you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Just let me know. You know how to reach me. All right, IMHO family. You good, Razor? We got a couple minutes left. Should we just go ahead and close it out?
I told you, I'm not following that.
That's what it is.
I'm a man of my word now.
All right, IMHO family. It's been fun. It's been good. Remember, you can follow up on all of our social media, IMHO Talk Show, to revisit the broadcast. And till next time, you know how to reach us. IMHO Talk Show.
Great job.
You know what? He said about the top man. I was say what?
We all knew it was coming. I said, Lord, please don't, please.